Okay. Well, hello, Glassman Boppers. Hello, Glassman Boppers. Hello, TYSO Goblins. It's me, Rick Glassman. If you're listening to this on iTunes, then all sounds normal. But for those of you watching on YouTube, you will probably realize that none of these episodes have ever had an introduction. I normally only do this for the iTunes version. But the cameras are still set up. My guest this week just left, and I'm very inspired to just make the introduction now and tell it to you. Now, we get high halfway through, and for about 10 minutes, I just do too many bits. You know, I've been getting a lot of DMs recently saying, people thinking I'm perfect, and I want to let you know that sometimes I'll do too many bits. But other than that, as my mother said, she should have had her uterus bronzed after her hysterectomy because I'm an Adonis. Anyway, this week's guest is Larry Charles. Larry Charles has been doing comedy for decades, and you may know him from a lot of different things, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you what made him be one of my favorites, and that's writer for Seinfeld, producer and director on Curb Your Enthusiasm, and directed all of the Sacha Baron Cohen movies, the Borat and Bruno and the Dictator. He is, I guess, as close to royalty as you could be for someone who is behind the camera more. I mean, he's worked on literally some of the best shows of all time. Curb Your Enthusiasm, man, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much. I'm still so stoned. But Curb Your Enthusiasm is my favorite show, and it defined what perfect television is. Now, I could also argue The Office. Those are the big two, but I connect on an emotional level to Curb. Anyway, thank you for your patience with me gushing over our next guest and bearing with the cadence and the amount of words I've chosen to use because my instincts aren't the sharpest at the moment. Oh, but I also want to plug something. The Sixth Lead, something I've talked about on a few of these podcasts, is a series that I wrote and directed. Basically, it's a bad version of Curb Your Enthusiasm. I want to release these episodes on my YouTube channel now that I have one, so I'm going to put them up now. So later, I want you guys to check out this series that I wrote and directed. There's 5 episodes. It's a half-hour total, and it's probably what I'm most proud of that I've done so far. So I'm tying that to this episode because he has literally inspired me to do this. Okay, all right. I think I've done it all. Oh, make sure you subscribe and click that little bell because that's good for you getting notifications. And that's good for me, I guess. So, you don't have to do it. And then press like, because I understand there's an algorithm that when that happens, more people will see it. And the more people that see it, the bigger the dick that I have. So, like and subscribe and enjoy this episode of Take Your Shoes Off with very, very, very special guest, Larry Charles from Seinfeld. All right, girls, I'm coming. Sorry, I just had to do that introduction. I'm ready for that 4-way. Yeah, come on, Rick, you got a big dick, and you're hot, and you could dunk. All right, well, get started without me. Okay, but we won't be able to come until you get in here. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 100 times. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. Oh, I'm gonna fuck you girls now. Would you mind taking your shoes off for me?
Is that for real?
That is for real.
That is for real?
That's for real.
Okay, sure.
That's you?
Do I need to wear these?
As long as your shoes are off.
Is that good?
It's great.
Yeah? These are very nice headphones.
Groovy.
Yes, sir. All right, and there's the coffee. Awesome.
It's kind of what separates the real life from the studio.
Oh, you're filming too. Oh my God, you have 2 cameras.
Scoop,
Yes. Oh, very impressive. 3 cameras. Where's the oh, there, yeah.
Rabbity blue, scoop dee. Oh yeah.
Taking my shoes off.
Yeah, thank you. And when you took your shoes off, the first thing you said was, "Are you serious?"
I did, yes. Well, I was thinking about it. Your house, if I may say, is a wonderful house. Is very clean.
Thank you.
It smells really good. I don't know how old you are. How old are you?
35.
All right. When I was your age, if I had been alone at that point, every time I lived alone ever in my life, my house was a complete wreck. People wouldn't even use the bathroom. That's how much of a slob I was. I didn't even figure that stuff out until I was long married and had children. So hats off to you. literally.
Yeah, I noticed.
For having such a nice house. It's really, really nice. The footwear ban, I might rethink, because I was realizing in the bathroom that it's kind of like being at the airport when you got to go through security. So usually, like today, I wore Converse high tops, the worst shoes for going through airport security, because you got to unlace those. There's a lot of laces. There's no shortcut. You can't just yank them off or anything like that. So for the airport, from now on, for years now, I wear slip-on type shoes, so I don't have to go through that anxiety of holding people up or being awkward and trying to keep my balance as I quickly take those shoes off. You should warn people, as you warn them about certain other things, about coming into the house. You may want to adapt your footwear based on the fact. Now, maybe I'm remiss in not knowing that the show is called Please Take Your Shoes Off.
Yeah, well, first of all, I got on the TSA pre-check list specifically so I didn't have to take my shoes off. You're a successful man. If you haven't done that yet, figure that out.
Well, I have global entry, but for some reason you're right. That does not give me. I just realized this recently, by the way. It doesn't give me carte blanche for the pre-check. If I'm going across the
carte
world,
blanche?
Well, a carte blanche used to be another kind of credit card, actually. So before the Diners Club, during that period of time. It's a different era. It's the era of this photograph behind you, actually.
I got it for $50, and it takes up a lot of real estate. It was my first piece of art I had in this place.
Wow, that's a good price.
Yeah.
Very good price.
So I want to stick on this shoes off thing for a
Please.
second.
Yes, it's not a bad idea. Although, again, like I said, I am somewhat remiss in not realizing. I don't know why I didn't realize that your show is actually called that.
But it's
couldn't
somebody's
be more obvious.
It's somebody's home.
Yeah, but not everybody takes off their shoes when they come into people's houses.
Absolutely. You have shoes on houses.
Yes.
Enjoy it.
Right.
You have shoes off houses.
Yes.
It's not that foreign.
What is the criteria for you? Like, were you always a shoes off person? Were your parents shoes off person?
Parents are not shoes off people.
Okay, so what happened?
How
did you break with your parents?
I lived in a house that often had their shoes on. And I'm seeing the marks. And I'm also, now when I'm seeing the marks, I'm projecting what they are. I'm on the street. Listen, I'm not perfect. I've stepped on cigarettes. Hell, I've stepped on dog shit.
Hell yeah.
I don't want to bring that into my home. This is a place that I actually don't even want to leave, which is interesting that you say that you were a disgusting slob. That's probably why you were so successful.
I'm not anymore.
Were.
Yes.
You left the house.
Yes.
You had reasons to go do stuff.
Right.
I literally, and I wouldn't, could eat off this floor.
Right. You've made it a home. I think maybe you're onto something here, because maybe in some unconscious way, I made my home uninhabitable so I would get out. It forced me out. I couldn't take my own apartment, and so I would leave. And maybe that forced me to be active in the outside world in a way that I really didn't want to. But it kind of propelled me into it against my will and made me challenge certain easy assumptions that I had about myself, or preconceived notions.
One of the two.
Certainly one.
Partially. Part of the initiative to do this podcast in my home is leaving that safety that I have, which is I don't like people coming over.
Right.
Taking off your shoes, as I said to you, is the most digestible one, because even if you don't want to, you've heard of it before. Yeah. But to have the ones where to wash the hands before you play my keyboard and don't touch this, it's a lot.
That is a lot.
So instead of making myself totally uncomfortable to people, just I'll go to your world.
Right.
It's similar to, and this is so cool that I'm bringing this up, The Bubble Boy, which you wrote.
Yes.
I want to have the remote.
Yes, of course.
I want to live my way.
Yes.
First, also, we started a conversation. Thank you for coming over, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I'm feeling myself being a little bit more hyper than normal, and that's probably just because the excitement I have that this...
I'm excited, too. I mean, we want to have a great conversation. We both are sort of like that. Anyway, in everything we do, every performance that we do, we want it to be great. So we feel that pressure even in this kind of informal setting.
Yeah, but this matters, so...
Well, I follow you on Instagram. I see what you're up to, and I worked with you. I directed you. That was the first time we met.
Cut to a clip.
Yes, thank you.
Hey.
Billy. Hey, man.
Hey.
Hey. This is I have something with my eyes. So.
Hi, I'm
this
Billy.
This is Clifford.
Hey,
this is Billy
yeah,
Crystal.
I got it. Hey, man. How you doing?
I'm a huge admirer.
Oh, hey, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, the Battle of the Network Stars, 1978. You crushed Letterman, bro.
Well, that's a long time.
Yeah, man.
It's a long time ago. See,
World record holder in the $10,000 pyramid.
yes, I am.
26 seconds left.
That's
But you suck his dick if you like him so much.
Jesus Christ, are you kidding?
Clifford and I went to college together at Carnegie Mellon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Clifford did it.
Were you in the acting program too?
Yeah.
He was for 1 year before he was cut.
Yeah, apparently I didn't suck enough dicks.
That's
And we're back?
Looking very different than you look now. Not nearly as dapper as this. And this is like tweed, no less.
Yeah.
Three-piece tweed. This is like a lawyer's suit.
Thank you.
What's going on?
I was in London a couple years ago when cryptocurrency was flying, and I thought, I'm set. I'm going to buy some glasses. I'm going to buy some suits, and then it went down. But
Yes,
I've
you
worn
still
this
had-
4 times.
Still have the wardrobe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you don't normally wear it for the podcast, but you wore it today.
Yeah. So sometimes I find it unnatural to get out exposition to the person in front of me who already knows it, so I could set it up for the camera.
Sure.
So I feel like at least acknowledging it makes me feel like
I'm
not
a
a fraud.
blank slate, so you could really just
Love
kind
it.
of fill me up with details.
So I don't know if you know this, but I just sent you an email yesterday that you read and responded to. And in that
course I
email, I had mentioned a couple of
It
things.
does happen where I will respond to emails and then have no memory of doing it, but in your case, I absolutely
Yeah, well, I
remember
mean, it was an hour ago. But I had mentioned just a couple of things about basically the metaphor of taking your shoes off without the literal application of it.
Right.
And one of those things, as an example I gave, sometimes you got to wear pants instead of shorts, just saying
Yes.
that I have to leave my comfort
That's
zone.
what I focused on.
The only thing you responded to was the joke that I made, which was you said wear pants. So
Yeah.
I thought if I'm gonna be uncomfortable,
Right.
and I will, and I am.
Yes.
I'm gonna wear
How
the
could
whole
you
thing.
not be? Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, here's the thing. I obviously focused in your prolix email.
What does prolix mean?
Long, voluminous, copious.
Long.
Yeah.
I got it.
Big, full. And I could be wrong about all of that, so we'll find out later. I should have focused on the metaphorical shoes off reference more and less on the shorts versus pants controversy, and then I would have been prepared.
But then we
with
wouldn't
right
have had the
footwear.
first 10 minutes of this podcast.
That's true, but we have a lot of stuff to talk about. So
do.
You do.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were this tall, for instance, and I directed you. I don't remember you being this. Did you grow since we worked together?
Yeah.
Wow, that
Yeah,
is
8
very
inches.
impressive. Yeah, you were. I think you were shorter than Josh Gad when we worked.
Yeah, I was
together.
5'3".
Amazing. It was
Yeah.
amazing. Yes.
And this is going to sound so corny, and I don't want to fan out, but performing for you made me a taller person.
I'm so proud to hear that. Thank you. That is a bigger impact than I could imagine having on a person's career.
Yeah. Well, I didn't do much for my career. No. But
Well, you are what you are. And acceptance
Which is a
part
saying.
of the deal, which obviously is an issue here. But
wait, hold on, because we were doing bits, and there was something I think you said real that I missed. What is obviously an issue? The acceptance of what?
self acceptance.
Oh, it's not an issue.
Not an issue. You are okay with who you are.
I've accepted who I am.
You've accepted who you are. It's kind of early for that. Are you so locked into who you are that you're okay accepting that, and that's it? Is that the end of growth for you?
No.
The end of expansion?
Listen, when we meet a new character, we accept who it is before any arc happens. I mean,
Right.
I'm accepting where I am now.
Right.
And I made a
Okay.
joke about saying I'm not okay and happy with it because I am. But also,
Right.
I would love to not have to wash my hands every 9 minutes. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
But I'm gonna buy the soap.
Are you in therapy right now?
Yeah.
And so are you, is it a goal to get to that point, or are you at the point of accepting it that you've kind of learned to live with it, you have your life, and you know how to navigate it?
Yeah, the latter. I was joking with the washing my hands. I mean, that's just a ritual people know. I mean, I do, but not that often.
Right.
I have contained most of my neuroses to my apartment.
Yes.
So when I leave, it's like, listen, this is your house. You want me to have my shoes on? My pleasure.
Right. Well, it'd be hard to work, I imagine, as an actor and have the diversity that you need to have if you were stuck too much in any kind of one habit or another.
Well, I love being able to go on stage or perform anywhere where when I feel like I'm supposed to be something else, it gives me the allowance to drop all of the things that cause me the anxiety. It's almost a safer place to be because, for example, a lot of times people, if they're embarrassed or if they feel ugly or whatever is considered to be negative, they're self-conscious about that because they're supposed to have good posture and be strong and be articulate and be smart. But if I'm playing something, or at least feeling like I'm supposed to be playing something that is this, then I'm doing a good job if I'm gross, if I'm dirty, if I'm touching something I shouldn't be touching.
Well, it's like the irony of wearing the mask liberates you. You know, you're liberated by putting on the mask, and most people see it the opposite way. But in truth, I think that's the case. People put on masks in order to liberate themselves, in order to allow themselves permission to do things they might not do when they were supposedly themselves without the mask. So that's a kind of a therapeutic value of acting, actually.
You started doing stand-up, but you're a behind-the-scenes kind of guy.
Yeah, I did. You know, I tried. My best friend, the guy who kind of inspired me to do stand-up, who I saw do stand-up as a teenager in high school, he was like a natural. He was like a Lenny Bruce type of Jim Carrey. He just had that kind of energy on stage. His name was Adam Leslie. He became a crackhead, and he was a criminal and a comedian all at the same time. He was breaking into people's houses after he would do a gig. But he eventually OD'd and died. When we were kids, he was an amazing, vital, charismatic person, and we did an act together. I don't think I would have had the courage to get up on stage myself, but hanging out with him, I started to do it. But I never found that I was the best version of myself on stage, like a Jerry Seinfeld or a Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock or whoever it is. They are the best versions of themselves on stage. They may not be the funniest guys at lunch, but they're the funniest guys on stage. I could not accept enough as a young man, whoever I was, to be that and reveal that on stage the way Richard Pryor did. You know, so I felt like I have great material, but my persona I can't bust through.
Was that a conscious thought of yours?
Yes, very much so. I felt it because I felt the nausea before I went on. I knew that my anxiety was out of control. Now, today, I don't feel that anymore. I feel more, I've had enough public exposure that I can kind of get past it. I still feel it, but I can move past it. I know that I will move past it. I have the confidence.
Does that come from the exposure or the accomplishment more?
I think it's from the exposure, actually, of doing it again and again and seeing what the worst case scenario is. It's like even if you bomb,
right,
you survive. Those kind of thoughts I did not have when I was a young man. I thought bombing was death, and there was no equivocation about that. And I would put everything on the line every time, which helped me in a lot of areas of my life. But in stand-up, I could not pace myself, and therefore I could not relax enough to be the best version of myself on stage. But I had great material, and I started selling the material.
Really? So you were writing for other people?
Oh, yeah. That's what I started
stand-up.
doing. For stand-up. I used to stand in front of the Comedy Store. This is the late 70s. And I didn't have a typewriter. I would literally handwrite jokes and take a piece of legal paper with the handwritten jokes. So,
Are you catering them to certain comics, or do you have jokes and you pitch them?
I would stand in front of the Comedy Store, and if I saw a comic that I recognized, and of course that was a very golden age of comedy at that time, I'd say, "You want to buy a joke?" And they would stop, they would check them out, and people started buying my jokes, often on consignment, by the way. They'd say, "Well, if it gets a laugh, I'll give you $10.
And do they read it, or do you pitch it to them?
Sometimes I pitch it to them, yes.
Do you remember any joke that you sold?
I sold a joke to Jay Leno about something about there was an advertising campaign at the time about Delta, the airline run by professionals. And he's like, what do they have in the other airlines? Amateurs? It was some, something like that. But he bought that one, I remember. And he did it on TV, I remember. And I was really, really super excited.
So your first experience writing comedy was writing stand-up for people standing outside the Comedy Store.
My other early experience, I didn't know anybody. When my dad was a failed stand-up comedian. His stage name was Psycho, the Exotic Neurotic. And he came out of and this is the truth, and he came out of World War II. And on the GI Bill, he chose to go to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. Most guys coming out of the war, they're buying houses for their families and making a plan. My dad went to drama school. But he told me when I came out to California that there was one guy I should look up. And there was a guy named Stan Burns, and he was in the Army with this guy Stan Burns. And this guy Stan Burns was a comedy writer who wrote material for my dad that he would do like on the base. Okay. And so when I came out to California in the late 70s, and I opened the phone book, and there was Stan Burns' name in the phone book. And I called him up cold. And I told him who I was, and he was like really super generous and nice to me and taught me a life lesson right there with his generosity and warmth and openness about show business, that you can be a generous person in this cutthroat competitive environment. And he invited me out to breakfast at Dupar's. We would go there.
I'm sorry if I missed
please.
this. What is he doing now at this point?
Sorry. You're right. That's a good question. He is now become a professional comedy writer. My father
For television,
failed, and now Stan Burns wrote for The Tonight Show, wrote for Get Smart. He wrote for all the big sitcoms and variety shows, Carol Burnett, won a bunch of Emmys. So he was and I used to memorize writers' credits when I was a kid on TV.
What does that mean?
When I watched TV on
memorize
sitcoms,
who the writers were.
Yes, I always looked to see who the writers were. I was very curious, like on The Tonight Show or on variety shows, because I thought, oh, maybe that's something I could do. So I'd meet with him like once a week or once every couple of weeks, and he allowed me to start writing jokes, like ghostwrite jokes for the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast. I'm a teenager.
Uh-huh.
This goes on for about 6 months, and then one day we're having breakfast, and he says, I got to tell you something. And I go, yes. And he says, you're a good kid, and I think you're really talented, and I like you a lot, and I'm happy to help you, and I'm glad we met. Yeah, but I have no idea who your father is. I have no clue. I have been racking my brain. I've been looking at my records. I don't remember who your dad was. And I never told my father that, actually. He just died like 2 weeks ago.
Your father?
My father just died.
I'm so sorry.
Yes, it was sad. But I never told him that.
That's a wild story.
Very wild. Very wild
Your
story.
dad spoke highly of him.
He was a god. My dad worshipped show business.
When you were a kid and you were seeing the excitement through your father, was it as romantic to you?
Well, I think there was a bit. He was taking me at a very early age into. We lived in Brooklyn, and he would take me into Manhattan, and Manhattan was like the Emerald City. He doesn't care about math or science.
Right, this
or
is
history.
your baseball.
Yes, exactly. He is quizzing. We're watching a movie. Who's that actor? What's the dialogue? What's the name of the movie? Who wrote it? Who directed it? What's that actress? I had, what year was that movie made? It's like I accumulated all of that encyclopedic knowledge of film rather than learning, doing better in science.
Right, or
and math.
having a clean home.
Right, exactly.
Do you think that's where the idea of starting to check the data points and who wrote what is? Because you
Yes.
were...
I became consumed in my own way. I was a much more academic consumer, I think. I was already watching things at a very early age, for whatever reason, with a critical eye in some way, where my father was just enamored. I was like, well, why is it funny? Or why did it make me cry? Or those. I was very curious with those kind of questions. I was a curious kid. I mean, in Hebrew school, I got thrown out of Hebrew school because I kept asking, well, if Cain killed Abel, and how did they go? What, is there only evil people now? It's all. I would ask these kind of impertinent questions to the rabbis. I went to a very orthodox,
which turned
Hebrew
you off
school.
of Judaism.
Exactly. I was curious. I was seeking knowledge and being shut down a lot.
I got kicked out of Hebrew school a lot too for just kind of like yelling and rolling on the floor and
Yes,
stuff.
but how Jewish was your Hebrew school?
It was so not Jewish that I don't even remember what the term is. I think Reform.
Okay, Reformed, right.
Yeah.
So I went to Orthodox Hebrew school.
I could tell.
Let me tell you something. To give you an idea how old school it was, they refused, at that time, this is kind of an interesting esoteric piece of knowledge that you'll probably appreciate. At that time, Hebrew was about to transition. The language, if you could believe it, was officially transitioning from the old Hebrew to the new Hebrew, which was more of an Israeli Hebrew. We had to learn, it's like learning Latin. We learned the old Hebrew. So for us, it wasn't Shabbat, it was Shabbos.
Are you kosher?
Hell no.
No, then.
No, my parents were completely secular.
Oh,
was
you lean into it. You said, I'm not eating on these plates, and I'm doing it this way.
I wore tzitzis. Come on, man. I was
Why?
into the whole
What
thing.
got you into that?
Showbiz?
Showbiz?
I was a seeker, and I still am.
Yeah.
And that was the world that was presented to me, was this very Jewish. I grew up in a very old world Jewish neighborhood, like a shtetl. You know, where there was like the butcher shop and the fish store. You know, everything was very, very old school.
You're
Very
my
old
parents'
world.
age, but you talk like my grandparents.
Right? Because they're probably from Brooklyn originally.
Yeah.
or someplace like that.
Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Brooklyn, Long Island.
Yes.
So that's what it is. It's just a little bit more Jewish there.
It's that sort of almost first generation. Like again, my grandparents didn't speak English.
Where are they from?
They were from Poland and Russia, so they didn't speak English at all. They spoke Yiddish, and my father spoke Yiddish, although he also spoke English perfectly. But in those days, they lived in a kind of a ghetto, a Jewish ghetto, where everybody spoke that language, and there wasn't a lot of motivation to sort of get out. My father was the youngest of his family of like 7 kids, and he was very Americanized because of that, and was looking to get out of it, you know, always.
So you moved to LA at 18?
Around that, yes.
Right after high school? Or you went to college for a little bit?
I went to college for a little bit. I also went on the road as a comedy team with my buddy Adam. We did that for a while. I wrote porno novels, and I wrote for Screw Magazine. And here I was living in this basement apartment with these guys, you know, in this like shithole, really. And we couldn't even make the rent. It was like $150 a month, and the 3 of us couldn't even put together the rent. So we wound up getting evicted from that place. But
What are you doing for work during that time before you're writing?
we were like schemers, basically. We would go to the track. And I did it with football. Larry David and I guess the first year of Seinfeld, we got completely addicted to football betting. And we used to go out on Monday and get the tout sheets, and we'd handicap the games. And Jerry was like, "What the hell are you guys doing? What happened to the show?" You know, because we were winning every week. We were doing great. The bookie loved us. You know, we were doing great every week. We had so much action. We kept parlaying. It was really, really fun. So I love that. I wish I could be a professional gambler. But of course, this is before people identified it as a disease. I have many friends who are in GA now, and I know the impact
We'll
of
put their
gambling.
pictures up here.
Yes, exactly, and they're very proud.
So you're a teenager. You're going on the road for a Manson band while doing Abbott and Costello bits. It's
Yes.
not working out for you.
No.
You're going to the racetrack. You're still not making rent. You move
Correct.
out to L.A.
Oh, so I was going to say, not to interrupt you, telling me my story, but so I said I could do better than this, and so I started writing.
I'm mad at you and mad at me for doing it.
So wait, this is it'll pay off. Trust me. So I start writing porno humor just to make my friends laugh. Not even thinking, oh, I could sell something, you know. I don't know where I even got the arrogance to do it, but I pick up this like thing that I wrote and I start reading it out loud to everybody. This dirty, disgusting humor that was hilarious, and people were doubled over in laughter. I mailed it to Screw Magazine, and they said, yeah, they would print it. The first thing I ever mailed
And you get credit.
and I get credit. So I wrote for Screw Magazine for a while, just freelance humor, $100 an article, whatever. That got me into porno novels. I started writing porno novels, and you sat in your cubicle. You couldn't stand up in your cubicle, but you would sit in your cubicle and type. You weren't even typing on your piece of paper meant nothing. It was going to this machine that would print it out.
Okay.
And then you would get it back, and then you had to proof it. And you had to write a novel a week, 150 pages. Had to have a sex scene every 5 pages. And this was at a time when I had to, I wasn't having enough sex to imagine sex scenes every 5 pages. So I was really having to use my imagination. It was feverish. And sometimes I'd have to go to the bathroom and masturbate and come back. I would work myself into such a frenzy that I would excuse myself.
Wait. So you haven't had enough sex. So you're coming up with stuff
Yes.
that probably doesn't exist.
Correct.
And then you're like, if this does exist, and now you're hard.
Yes.
So you go jerk off.
I'm a young man. I can't even focus now.
So then when you come back, does your writing suffer? Like, do you try and finish the climax scene, then you go rub one out?
That's a question I can't answer right now. I don't recall. I think that I was such an obsessive masturbator. I probably was finding all kinds of excuses. And then you're
literally coming back.
coming back from a sex scene. So it was I couldn't do it very long, but not for that reason. I didn't mind the masturbation.
I don't blame you.
What was worse was
We had to do it in the cubicles with everyone else.
exactly. But everybody was doing it, so it didn't really matter. Well, I would have like a mistake every line of every page. So by the end of the day, you had to do like 20 pages a day.
30.
whatever it was. And every day I was bleeding profusely from my fingers because of the razor blade. I had to cut so many fucking, pieces of paper. The whole page would be like a ransom note, And so my hands were like completely bloody all the time. And I actually had to quit because I couldn't keep cutting my hands up like that. So I eventually went to the Catskills. I worked as a bellhop in the Catskills.
Awesome.
Where I also did stand-up, and that was my best stand-up, was while I was in the Catskills. I felt the most comfortable.
Your dad coming to that stuff?
No, my father never, frankly, he had a kind of a competitive edge with me as time went on.
Wow.
Yeah, and didn't really, at least he was not able to express to me if he felt pride or happiness about anything that I did. He's somebody, my mother was the first person online with her condo friends to see Borat. And I'm like, Ma, your friend, you may become like the scourge of the condo with this. But she's like, no. And she took all her friends to see Borat and they loved it. I'm not sure my father ever saw Borat.
So we're going to continue either way, but I wanted to make a suggestion to you.
Yes.
And no obligations.
Of course.
Do you have any interest in smoking a little bit?
Yes. In fact, I was going to bring a joint and I forgot. My wife is such an amazing... She still smokes cigarettes, my wife. So she rolls the most amazing joints. It's like a work of art.
All right. So as you can imagine, we're going to need to be smoking over the tray.
Okay, right. So I'll take a hit. And then I'll come back and respond to things. Is that what you're saying? Oh, you're going to pass?
Yeah.
You'll pass the tray. Okay.
You're my guest.
Yes.
Does that mean you take the first hit? Because a part of me thinks you should take the first hit because you're the guest, but also the person who takes the first hit has the work of lighting and figuring out, which I would like to do. So the only compromise of that is me lighting it for you, which, we can all do it.
I'm perfectly okay with you lighting the joint and taking that first hit. Please do.
Fantastic.
This was sort of the grounds, if you will, under which we met.
The first
that
scene.
episode. That episode.
Cool, I want to talk about that with you.
Yeah. That was a nice sized joint.
Shout out to Speedweed, who gave me this joint. You know Speedweed?
They deliver.
I know they used to, at least. That was where the name came from. I don't know if they still do, but they host the Comedy Store roast battles.
Oh,
which is every Tuesday night, and every time I host it, he just gives me edibles and joints.
Oh, cool. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, they won't deliver to where I live anyway.
Where do you live?
I live up in the Santa Monica Mountains. Very isolated. Very
You
far
slept here
away.
from the Santa Monica Mountains?
Yes.
I would have made it earlier for you.
No, it's
before
fine.
the rush hour.
No, it was good. This is good.
Thank you.
It
Cool.
worked out perfectly. So yeah, the episode. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so before we even get into the episode, I want to talk about my experience getting there, because
Yes.
I've been doing stand-up, no agent, no representation. I end up meeting Bill Lawrence. I get on a television show, and my only acting experience, other than some commercials, is being a series regular on a multicam, which is not whatever.
What show is that?
It's called Undateable.
Okay.
So then Allison Jones has me come in for... You can keep it over there. I'm good for a while.
Yeah, actually, me too. I'll put it down.
All right. So,
That was great, though. Thank you.
yeah. Allison Jones had me come in. I auditioned for a couple episodes on the show Comedians, which was Josh Gad and Billy Crystal, and I got the part. And it was my first time acting. I've done it as a series regular, which is a different experience because, in a way, it's like I'm treated like it's my show. I have a parking spot. I'm treated a certain way.
Right.
Everyone's introducing themselves to me, yada, yada. So now I'm a guest. So it's my first time as a guest. Also, I'm not with other of my peers like on my show. I'm with literally legends of comedy. You know what I mean? And I not only am I not nervous, I'm like, I for whatever reason, I felt like I belonged to be here, deserved to be here, in a way that was way more than even people who deserve to be there. I was just like, yeah, This is good. Like I'm on
But
a show.
I thought that was great, actually. See, I thought that was that kind of added to your intensity in that scene. You know, I liked your energy. Your energy was always really unique, and that was one of the things we
cool.
liked about you.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I showed up and I got in the van and Josh is in there, and I know Josh. I don't know him personally yet, but cool, nice to meet you. And then you got in, and I didn't know you were part of it. And there, at that point, there's maybe other than like the Spielbergs that do like big studio movies. I maybe know 5 television five directors, because those are the people that I want to work with one day.
Sure.
And you got in the car, and it was just like, what the fuck? and I remember you said something to me about one of the lines, and then I said something on top of it, and you laughed, and you said, save it. I've talked about this in another podcast, but I'll never forget this because that changed the way I see things forever. I never heard that saying. Since I have heard those sayings.
Yes,
I said to you, save it for the podcast
you
with the
did.
shoe
That's
stuff.
right. Yes.
But when you said that, I knew what you meant. Maybe that's an obvious statement, but I don't know what people mean.
Sure.
So for you to say save it, a term I've never heard with a guy I don't know in a situation I've never been, and thought to myself, yeah, that one, it made me feel confident that you thought I had something to save. And 2, it's like, oh, that's something new to me. I never realized until that moment, at least not consciously, that energy is finite. Because especially for me, I'm blessed to have a big gas tank of it. And,
Yes.
and I'm invincible. I'm not truly, and as I've learned, I feel like I have this star in Mario, but I'm running into things and we're both dying. But I think I could do whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm in the car, I have this dopamine rush, there you are. But you said it, so I actually felt in my body gas, I felt like, yeah, save it. I didn't talk.
Right.
I remember Billy came in. I didn't feel the need or want to impress. What am I going to do? I'm going to flip. But he gets in the car. I shake his hand. He gives me his rolled up script to shake, which I clocked and didn't feel offended because I thought I wouldn't shake my hand. So we're going over, and I'm thinking to myself, oddly too much, watch this, because you told me to save it.
Yeah, yeah.
Already so high, by the way. So there I am on set, destroying for all these people. No, but then the scene, it went really well. And so I'm feeling myself, I get so high so fast. So I'm feeling myself wanting to get into a story that's probably 3 minutes. I get insecure talking too much, especially because you need to be. I want to tell this story.
Yeah.
Could I do it?
Sure, of course.
Interrupt all you want.
I'm being an audience, and I'm
Okay.
enjoying myself.
Couldn't have written this better.
By the way, if I may, before you launch into that, that's like what I'm so happy to hear you talk this way, because really that's the job that I do, really, is I want to give you the permission and the security and the confidence to take that leap, and so anything that I did that helped you along that path, I'm very grateful for.
Big time. For somebody to have that effect when it should be such an intimidating presence is beautiful. And I want to direct. That's what I really want to do. And I've thought about how, this is a different conversation, but I have learned as I've gotten older that sometimes my directness comes across as aggression, which is a problem in itself. But for me not to recognize that, and for a lot of people won't say something to me about it, it makes for a disconnect in a way that I don't even know happened. So I have been conscious as I've been over these past few years learning how I'm being received. And I always think about that as if I'm communicating to people on set. So anyway, it's a side thing, but that energy is something I want to be able to have.
Yeah, I think you're very capable of that, obviously. You have that already. So it just has to be kind of channeled in that direction, that's all.
So we do the scene, and it was very cool because it's just a funny show. It was a funny show.
Yeah.
And it was a great scene. It was Billy Crystal's coming down into the basement for Josh Gad. They're about to go to an award show.
Correct.
And Josh and I are getting high downstairs. Josh is nervous that Billy Crystal he shouldn't get high in front of Billy, and Billy's like, I've been doing this forever. And I'm just the emulsifying agent in the room who's the only one who is on both people's side. And it was a fun part, and you let us improvise.
Yes.
And Billy and I, between one of the scenes, I remember I had a pitch to Billy, and I pitched him about a show he was on. I don't remember exactly what it was. But I remember I said to him, okay, I'm going to say this, you say this. And he goes, yeah. And it wasn't until afterwards I realized I told Billy Crystal, and he we were a team.
Yeah.
So I felt the scene went well. I felt safe and comfortable, and I did my
Part
job.
of his coolness also, part of Billy Crystal's coolness is that generosity as well. And you'll see that with Jerry Seinfeld, Billy Crystal, Larry David. They love to see other people score. They enjoy it. So he's very good that way, I thought. That was something he was very comfortable with.
As the point of the story unfolds, it's going to get into that, into where he became the most intimidating person I've ever met in my entire life.
There's another side to all of it as well.
And it was, and I know, the story is when it happened. So I leave, I call my dad, because I'm nervous about everything I do. I've been doing stand-up at this point for 8 years. I go on the road. I haven't in a few years, but a couple years ago, I would cry. I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
It's terrifying.
Yes.
I've been doing it forever. I come on set for my first guest star with Billy Crystal and you, and I'm like, I could do this. So I call my dad. I'm in a very confident place, and it felt validating. I was written in for a third episode, and I'm like, all right, great. This is my only experience with acting. I guess this is my show. So there's a scene that was 3/4 of a page. It was Josh and I. It was added to the dynamic. Josh is upset that Billy likes me, and I'm saying, don't worry about it. Now both the character and me are confident that Billy likes me. And you don't call cut, and we go, and then you continue a little bit. And then after a few of those, Billy Crystal's in the background because he's in the next scene. So he's featured. You could see him, but he's not mic'd up, not part of it.
Right.
And I leave and I go, Billy! You don't call cut. And I go out of frame behind the curtains, back to the back, and I'm just in his face, Billy, baby, just like turning it on. And then you call cut, and he gave me a face that I recognized as not what it was before, but I didn't know what it meant. Quite literally. So I said, no good? Like wanting him to be like, yeah, that was great. And he goes, not your show. And I got cold.
Wow.
I got cold because for the same way that you said, save it, I knew what he meant. And I didn't know about that before he said it.
However your balls had descended in confidence, they must have shrunk right back up into
high enough to be in his hand because they were tiny. But I said to him, because I never heard this before. This thing that I've been doing my entire life of taking over and stepping on other people's toes, where somebody who I was able to hear, one, because of who he is, and two, because of where I am in my life, there's other people outside of your bubble.
Yes.
And he said it to me where I clocked it in my life and with him. And I said to him genuinely, thank you so much for telling me that. I had no idea. Like I was kind of speaking to him while articulating it to myself.
Right. And what was his reaction to that?
He just shrugged, and it is what it is. And I'm now it was just a 3-point swing, because not only is he not wanting me around, he did love me before. So I figured if he had money issues, he wants me as a roommate. Then we came in for another table read, and when I walked in, he said, the character name was Clifford. He goes, Clifford, they're going to have to write you your own spin-off. He was just basically busting my balls in a friendlier way.
Yes.
And he was so nice to me after that.
Right,
And
good.
he had me come in for a table read for something once, and he had a meeting with me, and we just talked about comedy, and it was very, very cool. And I've created this romantic idea, and here's the end of my story. Thank you for your patience. Maybe I'll edit most of this out. But
it brings up a lot of interesting themes, so go on. Please finish.
So I don't know if this is true, but because that moment that he said to me brought such self-awareness to me in things outside of work, let alone within it, I appreciate it so much that I have this romantic idea that Billy likes me because he was able to tell me something and my ego didn't get in the way of it. I don't know if he noticed that or not.
Well, I think that's is that the end?
Yes.
Because what I want to say is, you have to put yourself in other people's shoes sometimes also, and think about him in that situation at that point in the season also, despite the fun of that episode. And that episode where they get stoned and go to the award show is probably the most fun episode we did, actually. But there was tension and there was pressure, and the ratings weren't good, and there was a disagreement about the direction of the show, not the physical direction, but the creative direction in terms of the writing. So there was a lot of tension going on there, and you may have walked into a moment without even realizing it, and Billy, being an aware person and not a cruel person, but able to what's good about the show is he's able to tap into that darker side of himself, that id part of himself, that sort of more trivial, petty part of himself, and he was able to play that really well. But in truth, like Larry David, he's not like that. Mm-hmm. He's a really cool guy, actually. And so I think when he said that to you, I'm projecting now. I think when he said that to you, I imagine he knew immediately that it was too much, that he had maybe hurt your feelings unnecessarily.
Oh, what he said was too much.
Yes. That he himself, just like you became self-conscious in that moment, I bet he became self-conscious also. And he had a moment of like, that was too much. I shouldn't have said that. Because he's thinking basically he loves you. He does love you. He thought you were great. That's one of the reasons you came back. He had to be okay with that. So, and then he invited you to things afterwards to sort of do some penance for maybe that remark.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because nothing about it felt mean to me because I needed to hear it, but he doesn't know how I receive it.
Yeah, it's a cutting remark, even though you took it very well. It's still a cutting remark in a way, and the wrong person in the wrong moment could have taken it much worse than you did.
So in reality, the reason he was so nice to me and had me for other things, like as you said, was a penance. So had I not stepped on his toes, he wouldn't have been able to push me off. Had he not pushed me off, it's interesting. It's almost like wanting, like maybe I should instead of not letting my ego get in the way, maybe I should start becoming like a victim more.
Well, but I'm not suggesting that was the only reason that he called you in front of the
I know. I'm just
so
saying
I think that's
point.
an important point. Also, in other words, that was an aberration. That was a momentary blip in your relationship with him. Essentially, everything had been good before that. Everything was good after that, and I think he realized that was one step too far.
But those are two moments.
But you needed it also. See, that worked out.
Those are two moments in my life that were within a week of each other on the same show. That there's like I gain new tools. Once you learn how to use a hammer, you could use a hammer. But and there's been like eight or nine like big ones, and two of them were there. One was how to reserve myself, and two, why I need to.
Yes. Well, Billy Crystal's also like a great. And there's a lot of guys like this. I mean, he's been doing it so long. He really is an expert. He's like an expert witness in show business. You know what I mean? He knows all the rituals. He knows all the people. He's done everything. He's been a movie star. He's been a stage star. He's done it all. And you really can glean wisdom from him. You know, he does have it to share. And beyond that, unlike a lot of comedians and stars, he has a great family. He's great with his family. Very close, tight family that he's very generous with, and not at all the egocentric center of it, but part of this very, very vital family. So I was impressed and respected that also, just on that life level.
Yeah.
Tough to do.
Yeah. You said that, like, unlike most comics, they had a good family, good relationship with their family. And I agree with you. A lot of people don't. A lot of their comedy comes from dealing with the trauma of that.
Sure.
I find that many Jewish comedians, that is not a point of their trauma rather than the heritage of their family is a point of their language with it.
Right.
Most of my Jewish friend comedians, their parents are still together or at least have a good relationship with them. And other ones don't. I don't know if I've made that observation.
That's well, you know, it's also a generational thing too. You know, again, you're a little older than my oldest daughter. Okay, so it's really truly generational difference. When I was a kid, the world was just so different. If you think about the comedians that I was watching on TV, there were two kinds of comedy really that were kind of successful on TV in terms of stand-up, like on the Ed Sullivan Show. One was a comedian would come on and denigrate his wife for laughs.
Sure.
And then you would have women come on purposely making themselves look ugly, like Joan Rivers or Phyllis Diller, telling jokes about how ugly they were. You know what I mean? So it took a while.
Good old days, man.
Yeah, it took a while to even get past that kind of stuff, you know? Not to mention all the ethnic humor, which was, you know, completely racist, and, you know, who even realized it, because that's all you knew, you know. So a lot of that was kind of about to change on that cusp in the mid-'70s when Richard Pryor comes along and really...
This is a hot take, and I don't know if this is the case, but I'm curious. Do you think that's more because of like the times and the comedians that were changing, or would you say it was the Hebrew alphabet that really did it all?
What you mean? The Aleph alone has a lot of that's like the magical Kabbalah number. So maybe there's something to that. I don't know if there's some kind of messianic message in all this. It's very hard to say. The demographics of the time certainly do play a role, though. That I can attest to.
I'm a little high, so this is my fault for having to ask this question.
Sure.
You know I was joking about the alphabet, and then you were playing a joke back with me.
Yes.
Because it was very sincere, and my awareness is with your shoes in the other room.
That's why I was good as a director on Borat, because I would talk to people like this all the time and take them to an unreal realm, and they would think it was real. And I would basically create this trance state before Borat would come in, so that they would believe that this person they were about to meet was a real person from a real place, and he really was naive, and you really have to be patient with him. And by the way, you're really good. Have you ever been on TV before? Maybe we could do a pilot together. Let me give you my number after we're done with this, because I'm only doing and then.
Okay, here's what I'd like from you, assuming you have the time.
Yes.
Okay, I would like to show you what you do to them. I would like to do it to you.
Sure.
I would like to try and do it to you.
Yes.
But I'm not going to tell you when.
Okay.
But I'm just getting your permission now.
Well, the thing is that what I'm doing in these situations is just flowing with you. So it really doesn't, to me, it doesn't matter whether you're being real,
I wasn't really telling
real.
you. I was just letting the audience know this is the game I'm setting up. All right, could you just let me do the fucking game, man?
I'm sorry.
I know.
I'm sorry.
All right?
I want to understand the rules myself. That's all.
Well, you know what? You've given me a lot to think about my pre-podcast emails.
Yes.
And then the second thing.
I could look away if you want or something even.
Whatever. Yeah, that's fine. But whatever you do, just don't look out that window.
I will not. I will avert my gaze.
Okay. So if I go to the bathroom and you're in here by yourself, and I won't be able to see
Blinders,
if you do it.
man. I'm right in front of the
Flatiron building.
Yes.
Jinx. Do you know the rules of that game?
Yes, of course.
What games do I need to set up then?
You need to set. There's plenty of games. Did you ever play Ring Alivio?
Yes.
You did.
Yes.
Then you know the rules.
Of course. It's 2 spins, 3's a plenty.
How did you know that? That's
a buddy of mine used to play that.
It's really the old rules.
Well,
yeah,
or as I like to call them, the rules. Well, you can't just change. You can't change the game of basketball.
Well, that's what's happening in America now.
I would say don't get me started, but I have a lot of thoughts.
I'm sure you do.
Man, this administration, I don't know anything about politics. This administration.
You could pull it off, though, with the suit. You might as well go for it. How often are you going to be in this situation?
Well, I also don't want to make a joke about it, because I do have a lot of thoughts on the matter, and I don't think there's anything funny about it. Like you say, we could make jokes in a lot of situations, but because I have such a strong voice and people listen to this, I don't want to, if I'm misunderstood, have them think that something's okay in this world. That being said, some of the changes I would make are reform. I would reform.
Well, you went to reform synagogues. So it laid out your path for you back then.
And that's fun because that's the same name. But truthfully, all we are is data of memories from our past anyway. And if it wasn't the religion or the definition of it, it was the parents or what was for lunch.
Don't reduce me, by the way. Okay, I don't necessarily accept. We're not all that. So I don't accept that I don't accept that reductionist theory of what we are. We're more than machines. We have something. We have an X factor that can't be explained. There is a mystery.
Oh yeah.
That's all. That's all I'm saying.
But there's chemicals in our body. There's the genetics that we have and the way we're wired, and all is filtered through the conscious and subconscious of the experiences we have, and that is what shapes us.
That is where the miracle lies. I agree, but I mean, we are also possibly accessing. I don't know if you ever read or heard an ethnobotanist named Terence McKenna. Yeah. So great that you know who he is, because he talks about people taking psilocybin, or in those situations, or even talks about biblical stories in which consciousness is being altered, and you are having access. It becomes a code that gives you access to another realm.
You know, and this is semantics, but to argue it being another realm as if our realm isn't united as one otherwise. If there's no way to get to another universe, how does that universe exist if it's outside of the definition of everything ours is within?
Exactly.
So I don't want to be reduced right now. I don't want to be revised and revisionary, and the thing that you said that I don't remember all the words
all those words.
I don't want to do that. We're not soup. nor are we machines.
No.
And I've said this for weeks. We're somewhere in the middle
Yeah.
between soup and machine.
Like a soup machine. What is a soup machine? I guess a machine.
It's like a coffee maker, but for noodles. And
They don't have that. Why don't they have a soup machine?
I have a thought. It is that unlike a coffee, which people don't mind. I love a good crappy cup of Joe. I've heard somebody say
Yeah,
once.
yeah.
With soup, the idea of it is the romantic nature of its healing properties, of the connection to the home, to family, to tradition.
Making it.
Yes, and
This is making it.
yeah,
better.
I'm not drinking soup. I'm drinking love. I'm drinking attention. I'm drinking
right.
affection.
But-
or as I like to call it, I'm so sorry, it's time for a sponsor. I'm drinking a ice cold cup of Starbucks coffee. When I feel loved, it reminds me of two things. One, good flavor, and two, I don't know. I went on too long. I'm sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
all right. Well, I was just going to
Thanks for your
say,
patience.
I'm thinking about the soup maker because, see, you've moved on, but really, the biggest idea that may come out of this session may be the soup maker. This is like a Shark Tank product. I'm telling you. Now, think
Okay,
about it.
okay.
I understand what you're saying about the home feel, the warmth, the handmade quality of the soup, the healing quality of the soup. Absolutely essential qualities of soup. Imagine you could bring that quality to a little Keurig cup. Okay, and you could have that wherever you go in the world. You could have that sense of home, that sense of warmth, because you have that little Keurig cup, and it goes in that little soup machine, and boom, you have your own little cup of soup.
Okay, so I want you to know first, and most importantly, I am literally on your team with this.
Yes,
both
come on, man.
if we develop, and also in the moment of talking about it.
We co-invented it.
However, it is important in any business and any product to find the holes so you could plug them.
Sure.
So I just have a couple of red flags with that. One,
Hit me.
there's such a thing as a cup of soup. It's a powdered form soup in a packet.
That's
the way you
true.
would have a protein pack, you put it in hot water, you mix.
Right, everybody knows ramen. Ramen is imagine though that on a higher level.
Right. Now here's where the conundrum comes.
Okay.
By being on a higher level, by definition, we're either enhancing the nutrients or the flavor or some other property that people may get from it that I can't think of right now.
Sure.
But I love things in threes. It's
Yes.
called a Lotzi. So if that hasn't been able to be done, because ramen is thought of as college freshman, not even sophomore food.
Yes.
The poorest level of
Yes,
college.
the lowest
okay?
level.
There's a reason. It's because that feeling of love, that feeling of quality, of affection, is literal quality of affection. And you need this ingredients to be separate. You need for certain things to emulsify before others, to bake down, to, as you would say, with any nice fine Beurre Blanc sauce, to reduce.
Yes.
So I don't know if it can be done.
Well, Rick, don't be so limited in your imagination.
My father's name is Rick. Call me Mr. Glassman.
Mr. Glassman, don't you understand that you are limiting your imagination by saying, I don't know if it can be done? You know, think that it can be done and it will be done. It's already done, actually.
Oh, someone's done this?
No, but I'm saying we are projecting now the reality. We are creating the reality in which it is going to be done. First of all, when we're done with this, we can go Google it. It probably is done.
I changed my mind. Call me Rick.
Yeah, okay. Right in the middle. Okay, what's your middle name?
I'd rather not.
Okay.
It's poop face.
Do people call you Rick or do people call you Glass or Glassman?
I
or?
get a lot of different names.
Yeah, yeah.
I get a lot of different names.
Glassman's a good last name.
Yeah.
Because you could kind of call him Glassman. You can call you Glass. You can call you Man.
Those are the big three.
Right. But those are all solid.
Yeah, with yours, you have two. You have Dave.
That's it. It's over.
Oh no, you're not David. You're Charles. No, you have a whole bunch then.
When my aunt was in a nursing home, my father took me to go visit her, and we walked in, my Aunt Jean, and she's sitting there with a bunch of women, and they were all in their wheelchairs, and she goes, "Oh, look, my nephew, Larry David." So I'm used to that also.
Is she still with us?
No, she's not.
Okay.
No, that was it for her.
Because I was going to plug her Instagram.
No, she was unplugged actually at that point. Is what happened. There's no plug.
I'm sorry for laughing.
That's okay. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't want you to.
That's actually very poetic and dark.
So-
to only say things if it'll get a laugh.
Yes, that's right. Well, that's how I live. Imagine every campus room, every dorm room. Okay, imagine it now in your mind, and there is a little soup maker on the counter.
So you think this is making cheap soup taste good?
Yeah.
And the machine itself is not a high end product.
No, I think it's like the tea maker or the 1 cup, I think it's a pretty economical thing. Parents will buy it for their kids at school.
Right.
People will buy it to travel with. It's a travel thing,
What's different than powder than putting it into? See, you can't take dry coffee and put it into water and have it taste like real coffee.
Right.
You need it to drip in.
Yes.
So there's a technique to it. With soup, that doesn't exist. With soup, you could put the dried and mix it. So why need the machine if it's not just a hot water maker?
Well, they said people would not be able to talk on a phone without a cord.
And look what we're doing now.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it that way.
What I'm saying is that you're right. There are limitations to it, but those limitations are just a matter of time to be overcome. Soup itself, if you buy a can of do you have a can of Campbell's soup here?
Of course.
Okay.
Would you like me to?
No, I don't. Thank you, though. But a can of Campbell's soup is what? It's a condensed thing that you must add the water to.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the ramen, you must add the water to. And just like this, you would be adding water to it. If the flavor delivered and the price is right, it would probably surpass, or it could surpass, or at least compete in a very large market.
If the flavor were better, and then what was the second one?
The price,
the price was right.
Price was right.
I can't argue the logic of it.
No.
But I will.
Okay.
And here's my problem
Please do.
with it. No, I'm just joking.
I don't even want to go into this business, so you might as well talk me out of it before I get too deeply involved.
All right. Well, instead of talking you out of
I'm
that
going to do
business,
seed money. As soon as I leave here, I'm going to set up a corporation.
instead of turning you off of one product like a dirty political champion, I'm going to turn you on to another one.
Okay.
Which is something that I'm very passionate about. That I
Yes.
think that would
Wow.
be good for you to invest in.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of the story of the leopard and the frog?
It depends. I might know it under a different title, where it's two different. It's a different thing in a frog. Like
What is the one that you know?
A scorpion and a frog.
You know, scorpion. What's the scorpion and the frog?
The scorpion asked the frog to take him across the creek,
Mm-hmm.
and the frog agrees. And halfway across the creek, the scorpion stings the frog, and they both begin to sink, and they're going to drown. And the frog goes, "Why did you do that?" And the scorpion goes, "It's my character."
No, it's a different one.
Oh, okay.
This is.
Is it as good?
It's better.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
Pressure.
This is about. I mean, I didn't write the story. This
No,
is. I mean, to call it a story, I mean no disrespect. This ideology, but a frog asked a leopard if he could help him cross the bay.
If this is, by the way, if this was an Abbott and Costello routine, I would just be interrupting you. What kind of leopard? Where's the story take place? I would just, until Costello would be so upset that he wouldn't want to finish the story. But go ahead. I'm not going to do that. I'm just saying you're kind of telling a story that almost cries out for an Abbott-like interruption as you go along. Please. Just keep that in the back of your mind.
That's not the first time I've heard that.
Good. It's a common problem.
So the frog is on the leopard's back.
Yes.
And you know leopards. They're, it's like it's a sexy animal. It's the sexier of the cats.
You can't change your spots.
Or its character.
Right.
And maybe that's the derivation of the scorpion one. But
That's right.
I'm not sure if I said derivation right.
It doesn't matter.
Well.
It's done.
It's whom?
The bell tolls.
You got to let me get this leopard frog. It's very, very long.
It is long.
It's-
You have a lot of long anecdotes.
Yeah.
Why do you even need a guest? Why don't you just do this yourself?
Do you want to know the truth?
Yes.
My parents told me I should be having guests.
Okay. Where are they still in Cleveland?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, you just brought me back into reality. I'm so stoned. The stuff I actually want to talk about with you.
Okay, good.
And I forgot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But you don't have notes, which is cool. We don't need notes.
Well, I do have some notes.
Okay. But you so far have been freewheeling and we're doing well.
Well, I know what they are. There's like a few
Yeah,
of them.
yeah.
And they all start with you being out here and then Seinfeld. And we haven't even talked about any of that yet.
Yeah.
So let me finish the frog and the leopard story.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. So you moved out to Los Angeles.
Yes.
Yeah. Please tell me from the meeting of Larry to the doing stand-up with him to the first season of Seinfeld.
Well, there's a big gap there because, again, I started off here in Los Angeles as a teenager, selling jokes. I'm selling to even Jay Leno. Things are starting to happen.
Thank you.
I'm doing this ghostwriting for Stan Burns. He finally tells me he has no idea who my dad is. But I also am in a relationship, and the relationship falls apart. And I decide to give up everything, leave my car, leave my apartment. I go back to New York. I work for a summer in the Catskills, kind of getting my confidence back and returning to Los Angeles, at which time I moved into my friend's apartment on Cherokee down the street from Musso and Frank. A very close friend of mine that was still very close friends, Richard. And we live in this apartment in Cherokee. In fact, I don't have a bedroom. I just have the den, like this little area. And when I was in Los Angeles the first time, one of the other things I did, because I was hustling around, you have to keep in mind, man, I didn't know anybody. So I was constantly writing scripts. I must have written 30, 40 scripts.
Television scripts?
Movie scripts, everything. And I would carry them because, again, it costs money to make copies of these things. You'd have to go to a place to make copies. And so I had to be really careful. I didn't have the money at first to do that. And I would carry the scripts in the back of this Volkswagen Bug that I had. And if I saw somebody I recognized, I would fucking pull over and give them a script.
That's making me think of the Trip, the first episode, or the second when Kramer is trying to give it to one of the Savage Brothers. Is that from that?
That comes from that, exactly. I went into a Dutton, what is now, I don't know, a Starbucks on Hollywood Boulevard. It used to be a Dutton's bookstore. I walked in there one day, I parked my car, I walked in just to look at books, and I saw Rich Dreyfuss there. And I'm way taller you're taller than I am, but I'm way taller than Rich Dreyfuss. And at that time, I was extremely unshaven, unwashed. I had a leather jacket on, shades. And I saw him, and I raced out to my car, and I got a script, which, by the way, was a script about a college professor who was eaten by his students, and called Brain Food. And I come running back into the Duttons, and you know how bookstores are with the aisles, and he's looking at some books, and I loom over him, you know, and I go, and I'm so nervous, and I've been running, and I'm like, Mr. Travis, you know, and I started talking to him like this hulky guy looming over him, and he freaked out and ran away.
And that's literally the scene. Kramer's, he's over him. He's normally. He's not this weird. He says he's out of breath.
Yeah,
that is literally what happened.
That's literally what happened.
So cool.
Yeah. I was able to incorporate that because I remember how embarrassing and freaked out it was. I met Richard Dreyfuss years later, and he remembered the incident. Also, you know, I apologized to him, so that was good.
Has there been any follow up on Brain Food since?
It's sitting in a drawer, ready to go. It's like I have 50, 75 projects that are in a constant state of movement. A few that it's almost like a horse race. You know that when you go to the carnival and you shoot the water and the different horses, you know, that's how my projects are. Some will suddenly surge and have good action. Others will recede and disappear. You know, we had Josh Gad and I were supposed to make Kinnison for a long time.
I remember he was telling me about that.
Yeah, and that project has sort of receded right now for the time being.
Oh, I remember Josh told me that Kevin Hart was helping him with stuff, and I thought that was what a cool person to train with.
Absolutely, and he was really ready. But
what a great movie to come out.
It would be a great movie. There's a great script already. I mean, the script was written by this guy Rich Wilkes, great writer, and you know, it's one of those things. It might still come around at some point. You never know. That's the kind of the uncertainty that you must accept in this environment.
When you write, do you write to the word? Because Curb is, to me, the greatest show of all time.
Thank you.
And it's 5-page scripts, and that's kind of, I wanted to show you that I sent you an email, but I did a web series a few years ago, and I wanted to talk about it because I'm going to post it on YouTube now. It's called The Sixth Lead, and it was about me as the sixth lead of a television show, blah, blah, blah. But as I was writing it, I watched so much Curb, and I would do these to the episodes, and it was color-coded, but just finding, I didn't know how to write anything. I don't know the format or anything. And I would have arrows pointing to all the stories, and not that I've figured anything out, but that's what writing is to me now.
Yeah.
And having the way they connect, and the format of it is heavily improvised. So to me, I feel like that's the best way to do it, because that's the greatest show of all time.
Yeah.
But that's rare.
Well, don't forget, you have to, I mean, for me, or for Larry, I would say, by the way, I mean, if I may, I'll come back to this point. And the way I will do it is to go back to standing in front of the Comedy Store. The other thing I was doing at that time was when I had first come to California, I had also I used to park cars, and I would work the night shift. And so this is in concert with the Stan Burns stuff. We're standing in front of the Comedy Store. I was living in Venice, and I would walk home from Marina Del Rey, where I was parking cars at 6 o'clock in the morning, back to my apartment in Venice. Okay, there was a guy used to hang out on the beach there with his little dog. Tall, angular black man, very, very impressive-looking guy. And I recognized him. He was a guy named Darryl Igus, and he was in the movie Car Wash, which had all those great black stars in it. Which if you've never seen, you should see. Very funny movie. Richard Pryor's in it. George Carlin is in it. Great cast.
Okay.
Takes place all around the car wash. It's a very simple premise. I recognized him. Again, I'm that kind of person. I walk up to him. I go, hey, you're Darryl Igus. He's thrilled that I recognize him because he's the sixth lead in that movie. And we start hanging out. I start writing material for him.
For stand-up?
For stand-up. He's a stand-up. Yes, as it turns out, he's an actor and a stand-up. He's doing stand-up, and I write material for him. Stuff like, my name is Rasan Doughboy. Pillsbury is my slave name. Shit like that. So his wife, a woman named Toy, great woman, was the editor of one of Larry Flint's other magazines besides Hustler. He had like Chic, he had We, he had a whole publishing empire at that time. And magazines were still a vital part of the culture. So I also, at the same time, concurrently, I started writing humor for these adult magazines because I had, yes. And so then I went back to New York, as I told you. When I came back to California, moved into my friend's apartment down the street from Musso, I called her up because I hadn't heard anything from Darrow in 2 years.
Who's her?
The wife, Darrow's wife,
yeah.
Toy, who worked at Chic magazine or We magazine. I can't remember which one. And I thought, I'll call her up. Maybe I can get some freelance writing work. Because I figured, well, if Darrow had really hit it big, I would have heard about him by now. But I hadn't heard anything. But I needed money. I needed work. And I knew that his wife had a solid job as the editor of that magazine. I call her up cold after not talking to them for over 2 years now, maybe. And I go, hey, it's Larry, blah, blah, blah. I'd like to write a piece. And she's like, oh, it's great to hear from you. It's so weird that you're calling right at this moment because Darrow's right here with me. So Darrow gets on the phone. He goes, I can't believe you called. I don't know what happened to you, but I just got cast on a TV show. And they asked me if I knew any writers, and I told them your name. And they will go and read your material if you get your shit together.
It's Fridays?
For Fridays. So I just got into town, literally.
Cool.
I put all my stuff together. I have a lot of material. I write even new material because that's how motivated I am for this opportunity. I don't have a car. I hitchhike to the interview. I go to the interview. I kick ass at the interview. And it turned out they had hired everybody, but Jack Burns liked me so much that they actually fired the last two guys they had hired, which was a team, and they hired me instead. And I got the job on Fridays, and that's where I met Larry David.
He was a writer on it as well.
He was a writer. He was a writer and performer on Fridays.
But he was writing with you. You guys were in the room together?
We didn't even know each other when we started on Fridays. I had never met Larry David. I didn't know who he was until I was on that show, even though we're from the same neighborhood.
No. I'm saying you guys first connect literally in the writer's room.
In the making of the TV show, and eventually we started writing together, but not all the time. He wrote a lot of stuff on his own.
He's doing stand-up still at this point.
He was doing stand-up, but mostly he was performing on the show. That was a pretty full-time job at that time, and he really wasn't able to do the stand-up, only on occasion, as I recall. And again, his stand-up was like seeing Johnny Rotten, do stand-up. It was an amazing, radical performance. I've seen him come up on stage, look at the audience, and go, nah, and walk off.
I've heard that story. That's so
I've
funny.
seen him spit on people. I've seen him get into arguments with people when they were laughing at his material because they weren't laughing at the thing he wanted them to laugh at. So that was an experience. But he was also an actor on Fridays, very unhappy. He's older than I am, so he was already a grown man by the time we were doing the show.
What are the ages around?
He's probably like 32 and I'm like 22.
Okay.
Something like that, around that. And so I've never been a writer. I was a bellhop. I'm writing in my house, but I've never had to write on a deadline or have to really have a script format or all the stuff I didn't know anything about. So he was a disciplined writer. And there was a guy that I also shared an office with named Steve Adams. They were both older, like 10 years older, and they were much more disciplined people than I was. And I actually learned how to be a writer from watching them and writing with them and understanding the rules and the structure and the discipline that was required to do this properly. So that's something that Larry David imparted to me.
This question is maybe a ridiculous one. Is there a way, if I were an infant and wanting to understand, like you said, what you learned, the structure of a television show?
Yes.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. Is there a way you could give me a simple lesson of a structure of a comedy episode of television?
Well, first of all, I think the answer, if I may, and I think if you look at Seinfeld, it is the manifestation of this, is don't look at anything. You already, first of all, have all your input. Mm-hmm. You've been watching stuff and thinking about stuff and developing your sensibility through your entire life without even realizing it sometimes. And what is required to do that job right and come up with something great and something original and something distinctive and something impactful is to trust your instinct and not look at other things and say, oh, this has to be more like that. That's the kiss of death to me. What makes Seinfeld great, what makes Borat great, is that there's no way you could see it coming. And yet when it came, it was like, where's it been all my life? You know, it satisfied a familiarity while being fresh at the same time. And that can only happen randomly.
What's the familiarity in that situation?
You understand the laughter, you understand the themes of the humor. You wind up connecting to it in a deeper way than you would ever have thought possible. It takes you to a different place than most of the things that preceded it. Seinfeld took you to a different place than most sitcoms had before that. Why? None of us had ever done a sitcom before. We didn't know the rules of the sitcom. We made our own rules up. And we also had a fatalistic attitude about the show, which was, this we're going to do. Larry David said it to me. We'll do 13 episodes, you'll make some money, and then we'll move on with our lives. You know, that's the driving force of the original Seinfeld show was, we'll do 13 episodes, we'll do whatever the hell we want. It's going to fail, just like everything else we've ever done, and we'll move on. And then it didn't fail, you know. So the template was created under that environment, you know.
That's a religion, what you just said.
It is kind of religious in a way, yes.
Like I feel my eyes are a little watery right now.
I'm glad.
Yeah, but there's got to be some structure.
Well, but there is. But look at the TV shows that you admire, you know, and then what they have in common is that they push past their structural limitations, and that's an X factor that only the woman who does Fleabag or only Larry David or only Zach Galifianakis, only those people can have those sensibilities and do those shows. And that's what your show's going to be. Your show will eventually be the show that only you could do, you know, because there's no need anymore. There's such a glut of shit, a pile of crap that you have to choose from. There's no need to contribute to that. You might as well make the thing that you care most about. You know, whether it's seen or not seen, whether it's made or not made, that you don't have a lot of control over. You know, what you have control over is what comes out of you, you know, and that's what you have to start to accept and believe in. And every great writer that I've ever met along the way, and I'm way more self-conscious than those people are, but they have had the confidence to trust their instinct regardless of the consequences.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to make you speechless.
No, it's I don't need to tell you my life's backstory, but like that just connects to me on a very strong level.
Good. I'm glad.
Of being kicked out of a lot of things, you know, that maybe was deserved on some level, but that had a through line of one. Anyway, yeah, man. I hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's a very important life lesson also. And I think most people are, that part of it also is something that almost anybody has. You only have a little bit of control. In my experience in life, there's so much luck. I'm here because of a lot of lucky things. I'm a white guy. I'm a Jewish guy. I'm a white Jewish guy from a certain part of Brooklyn that is like the Kingston of Jewish comedy. That little neighborhood I grew up in, Mel Brooks, Larry David, I mean, it's ridiculous. The people that came, why? Why did all those people come from that little 10-block radius, So I'm born into it, you know what I mean? And during the period that I was germinating, being a young white Jewish comedy person was a path, and I was very lucky in that respect. And then I was good and I was a hardworking person, and I caught certain breaks. If you're on that carousel long enough, you'll get a shot at that golden ring, but you have to be ready when that opportunity comes along. And I was lucky enough to be in a position to get the golden ring and go for it and be ready to take it. So a lot of that is, I've been fired from many jobs. I was fired from the Arsenio Hall show. That's what preceded Seinfeld, So everything has a kind of a weird, in retrospect, a kind of a natural flow that you can't necessarily see as you're going through it.
You said there's a reason that all these comedians come from a 10-block radius. What's that reason?
I don't
the
know.
implication?
I don't.
Oh, it was a real.
To me, it's a mystery
question.
because, I think of Jamaican music. I think of reggae and Kingston, Jamaica, and I think every great Jamaican reggae star came from that little town, that little trench town, and it's kind of almost a mystery. And the same thing with this part of Brooklyn. It's like, why did so much powerful, influential Jewish American humor, which basically is American comedy, by the way.
And shares a specific culture from where you're from. And don't you think that the through line between the comedians that you mentioned and just of that genre, their comedy is the culture?
Absolutely.
So,
it's ingrained. It's ingrained. The absurdity of life is ingrained in your sensibility.
Oh, that's a great quote. Is that something you're just saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
The absurdity of life is ingrained in them.
Yeah. I mean, we all grew up. I grew up again in a different generation than Larry, but really the same in a way, because we all grew up seeing crazy things that we couldn't understand that would leave you either, horrified or laughing.
And you'd talk about it with each other.
Exactly. Everybody was, and if you even, I worked on Entourage also, and on Entourage, we really practiced the art of that intimate friendship that's based on insults. It's based on tapping into the weakest, most vulnerable part of your friend and going back and forth and cutting each other to shreds. And somehow or another, the intimacy of that makes you tighter, And so that's part of growing up in Brooklyn also, is nobody really talks straight to each other. Everything is a contest. Everything is a competition. And so that raises the bar on your verbal skills. And for me, not wanting to get my ass kicked was a big motivation as well. I had to be verbally dexterous to avoid 12 guys kicking my ass, So again,
I don't remember what episode it was, but there's an episode of Curb where it was dry clean. There was a dry cleaning.
Yes.
What episode? You know which one I'm talking about? What's
Gina
the story
Gershon,
in that?
Is she
yes.
the?
It's when he wants. It must be the producer's season when Larry is allowed to have sex.
Yes.
And he's got
to have sex through the hole in the sheet.
And there's a moment where he needs to find somebody, and Cheryl thinks that he can't, so go for it. And it becomes easy to him in a moment because there's a woman who's hitting on him, and and she says, how do you keep in such good shape? And he says, mostly running away from hoodlums. Is that your joke?
Well, I don't remember if it's my joke, but it's certainly something we could have discussed. We talk about it a lot.
Just fear of getting beaten up?
Yes, fear. Fear. I think that Mel Brooks, by the way, is from this neighborhood. He talks about this idea a lot also. He talks about the 2,000-year-old man that, anger, fear, these are the things that really drive comedy. Now, that may be changing now. But that was a driving force in comedy for a long time, are people's fears and people's anger.
Yep. Do you think it's changing now, or it's being supplemented with other stuff? I
am trying to assess myself the shifting landscape. So I think it's a lot of different. I think what's happened in comedy, and I've talked about this before, is that there was a time when the comedy that I grew up with and the comedy that I practiced essentially was the mainstream comedy. You know, as much as I tried to be radical, I wound up working on Seinfeld or, you know, being involved in like mainstream stuff. And I think that was accepted by the United States in general. You also had Norman Lear doing shows like The Jeffersons and Good Times, you know, where 40, 50 million people in those days in the 60s and 70s were watching one episode every week, you know. That was a large group of people sort of integrated into that. So it felt like things were moving in a certain direction. I think what happened was that in the 70s, and Richard Pryor felt this himself, that the liberation that Richard Pryor brought to people's sensibility wound up unleashing a lot of hate and racism and anger that wound up souring. And then you have Sam Kinison, you have Andrew Dice Clay, you have this very popular anger comedy that comes out of this. A lot of it's misogynistic anger, but it's anger at the society in some way. It's raging at, it's MAGA. You know, it's kind of early version of MAGA, and it tapped into that the way the Trump taps into it also. So out of that, it stopped working. It stopped being a mass thing. Suddenly people started questioning what mainstream comedy should be, just like what mainstream society should be. And it broke apart, rightfully so, into many different islands. And now comedy, to me, is a series of islands. There's people on the Louis C.K. Island still, you know, but there's people on the Hannah Gatsby Island, and they don't want to know anything about. They don't want to know about each other. They're not interested in each other's audience or comedy.
It's like genre of comedy is their political party.
Exactly. Now, out of that, at some point, there may be a synthesis again.
Yeah,
those islands may come together to some sort of new voice, and that's what we're in the middle of that evolutionary movement in
so
comedy.
it's almost overcorrecting for a moment of taking this is right and this is wrong, and then finding that gray, and it'll form a new Pangea.
I would almost call it like an evolution. Like it's like these different organisms now have to figure out how to live together to survive.
Yeah, Seinfeld, which was I guess Seinfeld wouldn't be a problem, but Entourage wouldn't happen now.
Entourage wouldn't. Well, even stories on Seinfeld or on Curb even might be more problematic now. People are, you know, the sensibility shifts, and that's how comedy is. By the way, if you watch comedy from the 50s,
it's the shortest shelf life of any genre.
Yes, exactly. So stuff that really stands up, like Seinfeld. For some reason, Seinfeld does transcend its time. And very few shows do that. And again, why? It's an accident. It's a miracle. It's an X factor. It's a mystery.
You don't have any guesses. It's just, it is what it is.
I can speculate all day. I know that it taps into a deeper truth, almost, and the ritual of watching it again and again and again is part of that also. For instance, the analogy to me is like when I was younger, The Godfather was that thing. People watched The Godfather, memorized The Godfather, and then were able to use The Godfather's aphorisms as kind of helpful reminders for daily life. Seinfeld has now become that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's now used as as aphorisms for daily life. So it's almost like church in a way. It's become like church. And so it's kind of transcended its time in that respect.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I've tried to find things that hold up that are from, you know, at least 20 years ago. And I can't tell the difference between if it holds up or it's my nostalgia for it.
Right.
But two things I'm confident in are Seinfeld and Naked Gun. That
I'm sure Naked Gun is still funny.
I watched it again a month ago. Oh my God.
Yeah. There's still comedy that holds up. It's rare. I will take you back, for instance, to a great analogy for that, the Marx Brothers versus W.C. Fields. The Marx Brothers, when I was a kid, they were the best. They were the funniest. I love the Marx Brothers. I memorized the Marx Brothers, every line of every movie. I love W.C. Fields also, but as I got older, I found the Marx Brothers humor was based on a lot of corny stuff. It made me cringe at times at how corny it would get, where W.C. Fields' humor was all based on attitude. He didn't have jokes. He just had attitude, and his attitude is as modern today as it was then. And I think that's also true of Seinfeld. It transcends the jokes in a way.
Yeah, it's heavily relationship-based.
Yes. And so I think that's an important part of this also. The comedy that dates is almost too topical to its time, and therefore can't really expand out to another time.
Right. So you think a lot of a comedy is has an expiration date. It's
Most comedy has. I mean, look, there was blackface comedy. You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
imagine.
but we never realize that it'll happen. You don't know in the moment that I shouldn't be painting my face.
Which is an important phenomena
that is discovered
that
through.
you don't know. You don't know in the moment. It seems okay,
Yeah.
and in fact, that time of Dice and Kinnison, that was a time people thought of liberation. People thought, oh, we were able to do whatever we want, but without seeing that there was a dark side to that.
Right.
You know,
You're just seeing the laughs or not the laughs.
yes, but you're not realizing that you were actually now targeting certain parts of the society that feel very unrepresented.
And if it's popular enough, creating a narrative for it as well.
exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's like social lack of awareness.
Right, exactly. And again, how could they know that in the middle of it? I
Right.
mean, it would be hard to step outside of that and see that when you're in the middle of it.
You know, this is a microcosm of something that is probably impossible, but the way for me to be brought into awareness is for you to say, you know, oh, sorry to interrupt you while you're telling me my story. And it's like, oh, thank you. You know, you told me.
Yeah.
People don't do that on a one-on-one. They're afraid of confrontation, not being liked, or whatever
Yeah.
it is they're projecting.
Yeah.
And they have an idea of what nice is as opposed to being honest. So people aren't going to do that.
Yeah.
So if somebody said something, if somebody went up back then in blackface, and then somebody said, "Hey man, I don't like that you do that," would they stop, or does the person feel like they are allowed to be doing that?
Well, I think it really depends on that person, but I think the person that's doing that in the first place has probably either thought about that and come to the conclusion that it's okay, or not thought about it at all.
Right.
I don't think it was really. It was the culture was such a white patriarchy, and it still is.
But you have to figure it out now. You can't go up there and not have it figured out.
Right. There's no excuse for it now.
Right.
Exactly. Without some sort of consciousness, awareness, those kind of things are. But again, you know, Trump throws all those rules out also because he's constantly breaking those rules, violating those rules. Every rule you were taught as a child, everything you were taught to be proper and correct and decent, he has violated and been rewarded for. So there's your anti-karma at work also, you know. Nothing, you know, all the good that we try to do is completely obviated, destroyed, decimated by the fact that Trump is rewarded for his evil deeds.
So the through line of it is people will like you and connect with you if you break the rules, whether it's for a television show or a racist president.
Well, you have to have the courage, I would say. I wouldn't put it that way. I'd say you have to have the courage to have
So it's
people
the
hate you. You have to have the courage, and as a performer, you understand rejection. If you can't handle rejection in show business or in politics, if you don't have the resilience to get up, you're going to be knocked down. You're going to be told you're shit. If you don't have the resilience to get up, and for whatever we might think about Trump, he obviously did that, and I've had to do it too. And most people, everybody has to do it, and a lot of people don't get up, and those people wind up falling by the wayside, sadly, because they may be super talented, they just couldn't get up from one of those blows, you know. And so getting up, that's a kind of a luck, you know, thing too. Why do we get up and others don't? You know,
You think it's a luck thing?
Well, I mean, it's a mystery that luck to me is a process.
So luck
you
could be
know?
just the genetics that you have and the experiences that led you to where you have
the
been.
things that you don't really have control over that come into contact with the things that you do have
It's
control
almost like
over.
you're saying luck and fate are synonymous in that case.
I think they are, and you could. I mean, these are the words that we have. They may be inadequate words. At some point, we'll have better words for those things. But yes, for now, those words will be sufficient.
So the next thing I want to talk about, there's no smooth transition to. And
Okay.
so that in itself is my buffer.
That was good. I thought you did well.
Thank God. Seinfeld, writing on it.
Yes.
And you worked your way up through that.
Yes.
You ended up, you were up, for 5 seasons, right?
Whatever, you know, again, I've never been able to, I think it's 4 or 5, 80 shows.
Okay, you did 80 shows of Seinfeld. And you're writing with Larry.
Not always. I mean, again, we all wrote by ourselves, and then
Right, that's right. So,
yeah.
So a traditional writer's room, there's a showrunner, and then there's the staff writers, and they
Right.
go on their own, but they meet and they break stories together and they pitch jokes and blah blah blah. Yeah. So my understanding of Seinfeld doesn't matter. So tell me, but it was Larry and Jerry were basically by themselves.
Right. Well, at the early stages, there wasn't anybody else around. There was just me in the other room. I'm in this room, and they're in that room.
Just the three of you?
Yeah, there was a guy named Matt Goldman. He was there for a couple of shows. He left.
The original one was just, the room was 4 people.
Yeah, there was no room. That's what I'm trying to say. There wasn't a writer's room. We didn't even know there was a thing called
Okay.
a writer's room. We
Okay.
didn't know about a writer's room. We knew how to write our scripts. So, and we didn't even know how to do that, really, frankly. And because we broke all these rules of production by writing those first few scripts also. The amount of sets, the amount of scenes. That was, sitcoms had 6 scenes tops at that time. We were writing scripts with 30 scenes. So they were all like, well, how are we going to do this? And we're like, well, just have them stand there. And they're like, okay. And we started to figure that out, And that was a big part of the show, was being able to do. That's one of the things that ultimately had a big impact on the sensibility of television shows, was going from a 6-scene story where everything had to come into the living room, basically. You'd come into the living room with your story. You won't believe what just happened to me out there. Blah, blah, blah. On our show, you might
get to see the
it.
street. You get to see the stories
Yes,
and everything.
give it a little bit of grounding in reality. So that was an important part of it. So that I don't remember where we were actually. what we were talking
The
about.
process of writing on Seinfeld, and I wanted to
Oh, right.
compare
There's only
this.
4 of us, right? So there was 3 of us really at a certain point, because Matt left, and this is before like Peter Millman came in. We were basically there. The 3 of us would sit, talk about maybe a story. Larry might come in and sit with me for a while. I might help him. I might come in and sit with him for a while. He and Jerry would work together, and it was like that. And then stories would even come out of those incidents. Like, for instance, they had a bathroom in their office, and the bathroom in the hallway was kind of not as nice as their bathroom. So I would just walk into their office, without knocking, and I would go take a shit in their bathroom. I bring a magazine in or whatever, and I would go, and I'm in their bathroom in that room while they're writing, and I'm sitting in the toilet taking a shit pretty daily.
Sure.
Okay. And
Congratulations.
And not knowing that they're getting really pissed at me. And not being aware of it. And finally they were like, we don't want you shitting in here anymore. You have to shit out there. And wound up using that in a Seinfeld, actually, with George, who was going into the other person's office and taking a shit there. So yes. It was just the 3 of us. There was different configurations. I would go off and write a script, bring a draft to them. We would talk about stuff, but it was basically no writer's room. We rarely pitched on things.
This is the first season.
The first season, by the second season, we had more people, but it still worked the same way. You basically would do a draft, and you give it to Larry and Jerry. If they like that draft.
Now, that draft, are these stories that you guys broke together, or are these stories that you're coming up with?
Stories again, all different. There's all different sources. A lot of the stories I'm coming up with, or Larry's coming up with, or Jerry's coming up with, or Peter Millman.
But before you go on your own to write the draft, you have stories that you guys have agreed upon already?
Yes, exactly.
That's what
I'm not wasting time.
Right.
In the very first days before we were in production, I wrote like maybe 2 or 3 scripts that wound up being like practice scripts in a way, just to learn how to do it, because Larry had given me his first scripts, which were hilarious and great, like the Chinese restaurant, and just all these classic scripts that made me laugh. And that's what I was aspiring to, and kind of trying to figure out how to find my way in. And they were very cool about allowing me to do my version of the show also. And they were very supportive of that, and rarely messed around with my scripts, because they were fairly well-contained units, But if Larry needed to add jokes or Jerry needed to add jokes of business, we would do that, certainly.
You'd come in, you'd do a script, and they say yes, no, yes.
Exactly. Usually yes, because by that time you're in production,
And you
have to make plans. You got to get ready for the casting, all those things, sets have to be built. And I had shows that were canceled at that point also, like this episode about the gun, where Elaine buys a gun, wrote the script was approved, cast it, started building the sets, and then people got very comfortable with the idea of the gun, and so they wound up canceling the episode, actually. But I understood. I didn't think I really nailed, no pun intended, the gun episode, really. And I think that's where Larry was such an exquisite writer, was he could find the darkest material and find a tone that was acceptable. Like The Contest is a perfect example of that.
You said no pun intended, because nailed you consider...
Like a nail gun.
Oh, I didn't connect it. So a certain kind of gun.
It's not the greatest pun in the world, sorry.
What is? And you don't have to answer that now.
Yeah,
but text
I
it
will
to
think
me.
about that.
Let me know.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in Seinfeld, and you're a writer.
I'm a writer. But there's nobody else, so
And
it's
you're
not
directing.
No, I'm not directing. What I'm doing is I go to every casting session. I go to every rehearsal. I go to all the shoots, and I stand there with Larry. and in editing also. And I stand there with Larry, and as we watch, I'm not happy with the direction of the show. I'm not even imagining that I'm ever going to be a director, okay? That's like too pretentious a thought for me to have about myself. So I won't even dare allow myself to think.
Interesting, that's pretentious to you.
Yes. I mean, where I grew up, if you had said to people, I want to be a director, you would get the shit beat out of you. So I couldn't tell people anything that I wanted. My desires were very private until I got out into the world a little bit more, you know? So the thought of being a director, it's like, how do you do that? I don't know how to do that. I could figure out, because I knew Woody Allen wrote jokes and was able to sell jokes, I could do that. Mm-hmm. That seemed, and Woody Allen's from that same neighborhood, of course.
Are the Reiners from there?
Joseph Heller, who wrote Catch-22, you know, quite a few people. That's what comes to my mind immediately. But there's a long list of people, actually. So, yeah, I didn't have any idea how to do that, you know. So, where were we again? What were we talking?
So you're not directing.
Oh, I'm not directing. Right.
Yeah,
So
and then I'm curious of the process of writing with Larry and or for Larry, and then directing him, and where, I mean, because he's playing a version of himself. Obviously, the situations are heavily heightened.
Yes.
But I want to know of how much of your ability to direct Larry was directing the comedy or directing him.
Well, I knew from the time of Fridays, I knew Larry's capabilities. I knew that people tended to dismiss his range, you know, and his abilities, particularly as a performer. And I saw the potential for that from the very beginning. And I thought it was very untapped for the most part. It was untapped on Fridays to some degree. It was untapped on the other things he did. And certainly on Seinfeld, he was very frustrated because he was feeling that desire to express himself.
As a performer.
Yes, that he had to kind of suppress to take care
Right.
of business with the show, you know? So I would go to the rehearsals with him and the shooting, and I would be standing behind him, and I was not satisfied with the direction. And I go, Larry, we need a reaction shot. When he does that joke, we have to be able to see this guy react to it, or whatever it was. We need to be. This is a big laugh. We need to be closer. We're too far away to really. And he would then transmit that to the director, But I never said, you know. There was a time, in fact, when they thought about a new director. And I did not have the courage to go, why don't you give me a chance? And I think they would have said yes, by the way. But I did not have the courage. Later, years later, Larry is doing Curb. And I appear as myself in what it became the pilot. Did not direct it, only appeared in it. And when it got picked up to be a series, Larry was like, you know, you should direct one of these. And I was like, okay.
What was the first one?
The first one I did was the Wire, where they have the wire across their backyard. Yeah, with Wayne Fetterman, who was hilarious.
There's an episode of Seinfeld that I clocked a while ago, not when it came out, but you know, whenever. Who gives a shit? When I rewatched it, and I don't know the episode, but it's when Jerry's dating somebody who has a laugh that he doesn't like. Not what's her name, but like she's just in an episode.
Yeah,
it's an annoying laugh. Something I don't remember what it was.
Yeah,
but I remember that what I liked was the first time she laughed weird, we kind of focused on Jerry making a kind of a disgusted face, which I clocked was there's a difference between having somebody have an annoying laugh and then us seeing that they recognize it. And before that, I thought the only way to do that is to establish a pattern.
Yes.
But this kind of set a pattern after the laugh one time because of seeing Jerry's reaction to it. And that made me kind of appreciate what a reaction shot could do. It literally contextualized something. I just wanted to interject that because I think about it.
Well, reaction shots
so much.
You know, I mean, historically anyway, in comedy, reaction shots are an essential component to the laugh. I mean, seeing someone else reacting, whether it was like back in the 30s where people were, you know, doing their double takes, or Seinfeld, or Borat. Borat was, we used to just do reaction shots.
Right.
We always had cameras on people as they were watching what was going on, so we would have those shots. I mean,
it sets the context of the world.
Yes, it also gives a pace and a rhythm to it as well, because you inject those where you need to. You know, it's like editing then becomes a very important component of that, because where those reactions are placed change the rhythm and tone of the scene also.
I apologize if I'm all over the place.
That's
Thank
okay.
you. But
Not at
that
all.
made me think. So there's an episode, I think it's the table read, which you did.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked that up beforehand because that's the best episode of television in history.
Oh, thank you, God.
And that's season 7 of Curb with the Seinfeld reunion.
Yes.
Is the greatest season
It
of,
was
of
fantastic,
television.
I agree.
That's the best episode of it. And there's a moment in there that's where when she first tells him about the rash on the pussy. and Larry looks at the woman who says it, and I remember noticing this. I don't know if this was in editing or the direction, because this is exactly what you said. The pacing, if that was all one shot, a 2 shot of both of them, it wouldn't have been as long.
Yes.
It wouldn't have been as long because it's reality.
Yes.
But watching it, she said it, it almost cuts to his reaction and freezes. And I feel, do you know this bit I'm talking about?
Vaguely at this point, yes.
So I felt that the reason you had that reaction shot as long as it was is because if you go back to her too soon, we don't get to swallow it.
Yes.
And we don't get to appreciate
Yes.
it. So it's almost like that was setting the pacing of it.
Yes.
By having it, if it's not that long, we don't get to laugh.
There are certain concepts that when they're introduced comedically are so radical that you need to give them a little air to land, and that was one of them. Like we did an episode about the woman who had the big vagina.
Mm-hmm.
When you throw that stuff out there, you need to
Give them a second.
Give them a second. Exactly.
Yeah.
They were big ideas.
Yeah, that's a good note.
Yeah.
If I think maybe sometimes the reason it's not connecting isn't the content, but literally you have to, if you're not going to define it for them, you have to let them figure it out.
Well, and also you have to figure out, I mean, the challenge with Curb or Seinfeld really to some degree, but more so with Curb because it's a film show with no audience, is figuring out that rhythm without really having the feedback of an audience.
Right.
With Borat, we would have friends and family screenings or whatever, and because we had so much, Borat was so dense with humor that a lot of it would just be missed the first time.
Mm-hmm.
People were laughing over 3, 4, 5 jokes, that would follow the big laugh.
So you added stuff literally just to let them hear it.
You would have to kind of adjust it a little bit because there was some great. I just wanted people to be able to hear it. That's
what
all.
A weird
but
calibration.
I also do love the fact, and we saw this again and again, like at Toronto Film Festival and all these places. I love the fact that the laughter would be so powerful that there was no way to really hold it long enough. People had to miss jokes.
Right.
And that was good because they wanted to see it again.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The directing Curb and Sacha Baron Cohen have something in common, which is you have to know what to capture in the moment because it's blocked only so much and it's beated out only so far.
Yes.
So this is a kind of technical question as a directing question. I would imagine you have. Let's just talk about Curb, I guess.
Okay.
I would imagine you have 3 cameras, and do you always have one on Larry?
We often 3 cameras became. We started with 2 cameras.
Uh-huh.
And I preferred 2 cameras for the most part, except in certain situations where a 3rd camera came in handy.
Why?
Because it would, in a room like this, for instance,
You can't.
It really limits what the cameras could do,
Right.
and what the actors could do even.
So one camera can't follow as much because it gets in the other one's way.
I prefer, that's almost becomes more proscenium-like when you have 3 cameras.
I don't know what proscenium means.
Like a sitcom done on a stage.
I understand.
With sets. Where we're in a 3-dimensional space, and I might want that camera to come around, and what happens inevitably, now you're on this guy's camera, so everybody's getting in each other's way.
Okay.
So in a way, the 2 cameras works best, except for scenes that are, look, I've used as many as 11 or 15 cameras, depending on the scene. The cage match in Bruno, there's 11 cameras covering it, and that's what you need it because it's only one take.
Okay, right.
It's a sporting event. It's live, So every situation calls for something different. But the basic Curb setup for the first few years was 2 cameras.
Well, when we did Comedians, you had 1 camera.
Because that was more of a film show. No, we used 2 cameras on that for sure.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. Now,
Okay.
not always in every scene. Like in the scene
In the
with
basement,
you,
I remember
in the
being 1.
basement, it may have been because we followed Billy down and we wanted to walk right into it and move around in it. It may have been 1 camera.
So if there's something that happens that you don't capture for whatever reason, and it's an improvised moment, in that moment, do you you got the punchline, but you didn't get the setup? Do you remember we got to get that as a pickup, or with improvised stuff, you let it go where it went?
I will blow my brains out when we miss a moment. I hate missing a moment.
Right.
So that's what I live for, are those moments. So I try to set everything up to make sure the moment is captured. And I impart to everyone who's working that this is good, you must be ready for the moment. You must be flexible enough to go with the flow of that moment. On Borat, it was essential because, again, if we didn't capture that moment, we had to go to a different city and do it all over again.
Because
it
you
was
blew your
truly
cover.
one take, exactly. So the camera guys, Anthony Hardwick, who is my DP and worked with me on many, many different things, he had that great instinct to move that camera when he had to and capture things, reactions and things like that. So he and I were very in sync on that. He understood the urgency, and you feel that urgency when you watch it. And on Curb, I try to bring that urgency to Curb, but on Curb, we do have the advantage of going back and doing it again. And so, yes, on good lines, good reactions, things that might get missed, or things that I like and I want to amplify, we get a chance to go back and do it
And
again.
when you notice it, do you write it down?
Yeah.
You say, okay, when we have
Yeah.
time, we'll go back to this
Yeah,
thing.
I'll either write it down or I'll have somebody there
Right.
to write it down. Or sometimes Jeff Schaefer's on the set, who's the producer. Usually
Yeah, I know
the
Jeff.
directors are also the producers. So there's usually other people around and somebody's making notes. So we're keeping track of all this stuff. Plus, we have things that have to take place in the scene also. The outlines are more like 11, 12 pages usually. And there are things that must take place in those scenes. There's a line that has to be
Right.
said. So we may want to go back and get those right or get variations on those also.
You having two cameras, possibly not behind either one of them. You have your friend, who did you say is your DP that you use a lot?
Anthony Hardwick.
Anthony Hardwick. So you have a shorthand and you
He
trust
wasn't
him.
on Curb, though. He was not on Curb, and because of that, Curb, I didn't feel that Curb had quite the dexterity of camera work that the movies did.
So how do you, and when you don't have a Hardwick with you and you have a stranger, how do you communicate? Like, to say to somebody, don't miss the moment, is only what they're able to do and how much they know what that means.
Yeah.
Is there any tangible direction that you could tell the camera people to make sure they get it?
Yes, I don't. It took me a while to learn how to do it, obviously. But I don't walk on. When I did this Bob Dylan movie, that was the first movie I ever did. It was like an amazing script that we wrote together, and I storyboarded myself because I'm kind of a cartoonist, and I storyboarded every image of that movie to be prepared for it. So I was like overly prepared for that movie. But I learned from that I need to come in and be able to talk to everybody and tell them what the hell we're doing. That's what my job is. So when I walk onto the set on Curb, even though it's going to be improvised, and even though there's only a little paragraph, I'm going, okay, we're going to need one single on Larry the whole time. I want to also be able to see this. We're going to have to come back and do a second pass in which we see this. We can come close, and I'll give them a list of things that need to be accomplished visually in that scene, and the AD will usually keep track of that, and we will mark those things off as we hit them.
Could you give some examples of something like that? Like the one that you gave that I connected with was, we need to have a single on Larry.
Yes.
So that's okay. I could do that.
Yes. For instance, there are great moments when we are just doing what we used to call a roving shot. We're going from Larry to whoever, Paul Mazursky or Richard Kind or whoever it was, and we're going back and forth, back and forth. You can't do anything else while you're doing that pass. That pass is generally a separate pass, okay? But you can't, because that camera's so close that any other camera's going to catch it. So that's a separate pass. And then I might want to do one that's over Richard Kind to Larry, over Larry to Richard Kind, a stationary two-shot. Each one of those is sort of in the way of the other and requires a separate pass.
So I want to put this in directly to when I did The Sixth Lead, which was literally, it was Curb. It was just a bad version of Curb Enthusiasm.
Right.
So when I was there was I got two cameras, and I had to figure out how I wanted to have it, and I wanted a one shot of each of us, but then I don't get to see. That wasn't possible.
Yes.
I needed to have a two. So what I decided was to have a two shot, but to move. Sometimes it was like 180, and sometimes it was like a little bit behind me, but you could see my face.
Yes.
So it gave me, because I only had one take at everything because of time and
Yes.
the way it was. So when I did that, I noticed in editing, I would have to get lucky. Like sometimes when I want it here it is, and then sometimes I'd have to wait. And if I was using,
Right.
if trying to cheat,
You had nothing to cut with it.
Right.
Yes.
So I still haven't figured out, because I did something else recently and I had the same issue. I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Okay.
If I only have one, because a lot of the stuff I'm doing, it's one pass at it.
Right.
I have 10 minutes in a certain place.
Right. Well, you need to, if you want to have editing options, like on Dangerous Comedy, the Netflix show, I used one camera. Okay. But I made sure that when I was either done with the reason I was there or before I even shot with the person I was going to talk to, that we shot other stuff. At some point in your schedule, as tight as it was, you need to shoot something else with that same single camera. You could, it could be, if in a documentary, you could cut to, you
mean like B-roll?
Yeah, you can cut, exactly, B-roll. You need your version of B-roll, whatever that is. Figuring out your unique version of that to have some kind of cutting material.
As a device, just because of what production
Yeah,
is. Not
do
for,
one take where you're not with the perfect coverage, so that you could cut that moving camera in.
Do one take with the perfect coverage?
Do a take that's maybe stationary and in contrast to that shot, so you can cut to something. There's a way to do it, even with the limited resources that you have. There's a way to do that. In the Bob Dylan movie, I shot almost everything in one take, and my cut was 3.5 hours, and I had to cut it down. And I was forced to cut it down to like 110 minutes. And this guy, Pietro Scalia, who's an Academy Award-winning editor, came in to help me. And we had to figure out ways from taking from other places.
Literally for the edit.
Yes, because most of it was shot in one take. And to dissolve into other things and make cuts, we found a way to, despite the fact that it was one camera,
using footage from stuff you already shot, intended for something different.
Exactly. We had enough footage that we were able to use it. And you probably have enough extra footage of what you're shooting, despite these 10-minute takes.
I just need to find the device.
Exactly.
What was the device in the Bob Dylan movie?
Well, it depended on the scene. I mean, the music was a great device for us because we were able to dissolve in and out of songs to another scene.
Yep.
And that was a way to get in and out of places that made it much simpler, actually.
The difference in scripting something entirely and beating it out.
Okay.
From a writing aspect, I lean into, and a performer, I lean into beating it out because I know the story and the lines I want to say, and I could come up with jokes. Now I could do it better in a moment, and then the actors could bring their version of that. It just feels more efficient if you have the right people. But it's rarely done because it's not as consistent, I guess. I don't know. What's the reason? Why is scripted the way to do it? And everything that's not scripted is like you always hear how special that is.
Well, I think that the lines have gotten blurred. I mean, and again, Larry and myself to some degree have been at the forefront of trying to blur those lines. I mean, there's no more meticulous writer than Larry David. Okay, I mean, every word meant something to him. He didn't use words lightly when he wrote a script. It was tight. It was exactly the way he wanted it. So the fact that he was able to let go of that and he basically made this new form, and I don't know if anybody else had ever done that form, but I'd never seen that form, which were these outlines that basically walked you through a scene without giving you all the dialogue, but they were still written. Those things are written. It's a mistake for people to think that it's a free-for-all that we do.
I've Jeff Schaefer, incidentally, who I've become friends with, has let me read a few.
Yeah.
And I was surprised at how much was. But it's still very different.
And more structured than there used to be, by the way. Once Jeff and Alec and Dave started working on the show, because they are much more into structure than the original concept. The concept of the show originally was simpler stories that you could kind of dwell on, and the show's got more. The plots got more complicated.
Yeah, some of them have 9 stories that come together.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun of it, which was also what happened with Seinfeld. We started off with, it was going to be Larry and Jerry hanging out at George and Jerry hanging out in the coffee shop or hanging out in the apartment, and NBC kept pushing us to make plots. And Larry said, if we're going to do a plot, it's got to be funny. And we started to come up with funny stories to go with the stuff that we were already writing that we knew was funny. So yes, that all has to kind of evolve. So Larry, what we're doing on Curb is writing, absolutely writing, but it's not beat by beat. It allows yourself to find the funniest thing in the moment and not be bound by contrived words. You know, when you see writing now, when you see things that are really, really written, where all the dialogue is written in a modern context, for me, it's hard for me not to feel the contrivance of that, not to feel the actors saying lines. You know, when someone can make me forget that they're an actor saying lines, and I'm immersed in that moment, then I know that's where the great writing is.
I could oftentimes, if I'm guessing, but tell when something's improvised and when it's not.
Yeah.
Less about the person that's speaking and more about how the person responds to it.
Right.
And I think that just directionally, it offers so much to have. That's why I like this idea of saving it on a much bigger platform. I don't like practicing scenes with the person I'm doing it with.
Right.
I don't want to anticipate anything.
No.
So to have that discipline is one thing, to be able to implement it, but then to be on a set that literally forces it by, I don't know what they're saying.
Yeah.
You're better.
Yeah. Well, but some people are very nervous about you. You allowed yourself to sort of give yourself over to the process and surrender to it, and you found the liberation within that. But some people really like to have their beats worked out. Some people like to have their blocking worked out. You know what I mean? They really want to hit their marks, and they need to know that kind of stuff. And when you go into Curb, or you go into things that are a little more improvised, you need people to let go of those sort of crutches and be free and find out what happens. And then slowly what they discover is they can make mistakes, they can take chances, and they might stumble into something that's so great that they could never have thought about it if they were trying to think beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Lewis is a good example of this. Richard Lewis...
Is that the Richard roommate that you mentioned earlier?
No, that's a different Richard. No, Richard Lewis is, again, more of Larry David's generation, but he's great on the show, but he would originally come in with a piece of paper in his pocket that he would keep hidden, that he had little beats on it, and he had little jokes, and he had little things he wanted to hit, and little meticulous things. And when we discovered that, I would take that piece of paper and I'd throw it away, you know, and I'd force him to plunge in without preconceived notions, because then you're trying to work the scene to get to your joke. You know,
Right.
you're not in the moment
Right.
anymore. So he was so much better when we got rid of that stuff, you know.
That's and I more as a cheat for me, but when I have somebody come on, I already know you. I mean, your work, so there wasn't much I had to kind of look into. But I think of a few questions maybe, but I don't want to have a list or a plan or a theme, and maybe that's just because I'm cheating the hard work. But I find that I'm most present, if not that way, and I like the idea of a conversation.
It is a hard balance.
It's a hard to make that
Yes.
to make that efficient.
Yeah, well, because I had that same challenge on the Dangerous Comedy Show.
Sure.
Where I'd be in these other countries and I was going to have this opportunity to talk to this person. I had to go in prepared. And again, by the way, this is a rule of improvisation to me as well. You need to know the melody before you could do the solo. You know, it's important to understand how the melody works.
Is the melody for you tone?
The melody is the story points, is the content, and then you can take that content and you can bend it and shape it and digress from it, because you can always come back to it. It's there for you. Like a great guitar solo goes off of the melody, but eventually it wends its way back to the melody. You know, it joins back into the song again. And all great improv is like that. It's all off of this kind of skeletal frame that we hang everything on.
So when you go to Dangerous Comedy, you don't know these people. Like the Soldiers episode, you're
Yes.
basically talking with ex-soldiers.
Yes.
So you first interview them, and then you think of stuff, and then you go back.
No, I will think in that case, because I wanted to be prepared, and I knew I only had these one opportunities in some cases. I would write pages and pages of questions.
Catered to someone that you haven't even met yet.
Yes. I would sit in the hotel room the night before I was going to do the interview, and I would go over all my research, and I would write all these questions. And I would have them printed out in the morning, and then I would be ready to go with those questions. But I could get 3 questions in and start to go off.
Right. So it's basically you need the questions to get on the board,
Yes.
and then if you ride the wave, you could go as long as it goes.
Yes. Again, going back to the trusting of the instincts. I could tell that we were going to go in a great direction and fuck these questions. Let's see where we go in this direction. And if I needed to, I would somehow bring it back to those questions.
Did you always have those instincts that knew that stuff, or is that something that you built upon? Because that's a beautiful place to live, to know that I know if it's working or if it's not.
Right. I don't know where along the line. Like I said, I used to sit in a room with Bob Dylan for 12 hours a day. And there was Bob Dylan and Larry David. Again, luck. I had the luck of having them both be sort of inadvertent mentors to me. And both of them are these uncompromising artists, the utmost integrity, and they have a certain amount. Maybe they're on the spectrum. Maybe they're savants. I don't know. I've never diagnosed them. But they do what they do, and they don't think twice about it. You know? They don't think twice. If you don't like it, that's your issue. They're going to do it. This is what they do. They'd be doing it at a bus stop.
So I want to tie this into something I've talked about before, and I mentioned to you in my email, but I was diagnosed with autism a few years ago. And up until that moment, I had that mentality of this is what it is, but it wasn't a decision of despite what you think. I had no idea that anybody thought differently than me. Right. So when I'm being funny, even if I'm bothering everybody, no, I don't. I'm hilarious. And then I learned as a 30-something, I'm 32-year-old, the blinders are up. So for the past few years, I've been more trying to nurture the side that cares what other people think. And I don't know if it's to my detriment or not. I'm sure there's an equilibrium somewhere. But I almost miss the days where I didn't care because I don't want to care. I sent you that email not because I wanted to send you that email. I sent you the email because I've learned that this might be better for you.
Right.
Not that I did a great gesture for you.
But that's who you are. I mean, I think it's,
But don't you have to care?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's nothing wrong with that. I think you have to care if you care. You know what I mean? There are people in the world who don't care. There are people in the world on that entire spectrum, as we know, all levels of emotional attachment and detachment. You do the best you can with the tools you have. If you have a desire to care, if you want to feel the fulfillment of caring, you'll practice that somehow. You'll figure it out. Maybe it's not going to be directed towards humans. Maybe it'll be directed towards a dog or something like that. But you're going to figure out caring and nurture yourself with that, hopefully, But if you're somebody who doesn't care, you don't care. And it's hard to contrive that. You know what I mean? So it's like to be your authentic self is going to allow you to act with everybody as an authentic person.
Yeah, so it's seems as a performer and as a person, the best place to live is in acceptance of what you really are. Right,
but to be aware of it, aware that there are consequences.
You can't accept something before you're aware of it.
Right, you have to be aware of it. But the third part to me, and this is true of all freedoms, is you must be aware of the consequences too. There are consequences to every choice that we make, and sometimes those are not the best consequences. But if we want to be our true selves, dude, there may be negative consequences sometimes.
I literally had an out loud conversation with myself 2 nights ago. I texted somebody who I kind of look up to, and I say friends, he wouldn't. You know what I mean? And I didn't get a response back, and I felt this feeling that it was I don't have much, which was very high school of like I'm not accepted. I guess I felt it, but not in this raw of a level. Like it chemically affected me in a way that I was the first time I was able to check in with myself since having that feeling. And what I said to myself was the reason that happened is because I put myself out a certain way. That's a cost. Now, why do I put myself out a certain way? And I thought of you because in a couple days you're coming over. If I don't put myself out, I don't get Larry Charles to do my podcast, which means the cost of getting Larry Charles to do my podcast is me texting somebody and feeling embarrassed.
Right.
Is it worth it? And I had that conversation with myself where I decided, I want to be this thing, and there's a cost.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly. You have to take those risks, and be willing to be rejected. Again, I wouldn't be a director if I didn't go along. I remember sitting with Bob Dylan. Literally sitting with Bob Dylan, okay? And we're talking about this movie that we're going to make. And I'm thinking, and I know that every director in town would direct this movie, but I know that I should really direct this movie. I've co-written it. I know it well. I should direct it. but I'm sitting with Bob Dylan. What right do I have to even say this to him? But one day I screw up the courage and I go, Bob, I really think I should direct this. And he goes, okay. And that was it. You know what I mean? Sometimes it just falls together.
Yeah.
But you have to, he could have said, what are you, fucking crazy? What do you know about it? I got Martin Scorsese wants to direct this, and I was ready for that, dreading that, but expecting that. So you can imagine sometimes it pays off, you know? The relief. I mean, I'm looking for relief a lot of the time. Not even fulfillment, just the relief.
Right.
The anxiety has been released for a moment.
Running away from the hoodlums.
Exactly.
All right, man.
Okay, good.
Well, I'm posting this the web series I made, The Sixth Lead. So that's in the YouTube channel. Then check that out. So insecure when I did that.
But I will check it out myself.
Fantastic.
Please, I will.
Larry Charles is checking it out, so go ahead and go to videos.
Wait, I have a look at that. I have a hole in my sock also.
Oh.
But that's how cool this is. I don't care.
I'm going to get you some take your shoes off socks.
Oh, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, I gotta get them made.
Like the sushi restaurants. Remember, they used to have, you had to take off your shoes, and they would actually give you disgusting slippers to put on. Have you ever been to a Japanese restaurant like that?
Never that I had to put on. I wouldn't go in.
It's like bowling shoes, but only no. I guess you wear them with your socks. I suppose that made it okay.
I have my own bowling shoes for this very reason.
Well, like on the airplanes, they give you slippers also sometimes.
Yeah.
In that particular class.
Yeah, you could say it.
Yeah.
First.
Well, sometimes even
Business.
business.
Yeah, business. Well, you heard it here first. Sometimes first is business. This
That's
week's
right.
guest is Larry Charles.
It depends who's paying for it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what you mean.
Well, I'm trying to always scam free airline tickets. Believe me, you think I want to spend money on first class tickets? Nobody does.
I understand.
Yeah. And I'm not at the level, and I never will be, and I've never even been close to the level, but I have experienced the private plane experience, which is about the most spoiling. No matter how radical you are, no matter how much you want to overthrow society, you will be seduced by the private plane experience. That's all I'm saying.
The private plane experience makes you believe that you are better than, you're saying.
It makes you
in
believe that
moment.
capitalism is a brilliant idea.
Because look at me now.
Look at what the wealthy, the privileged have this ability to bypass the taking off the shoes on the security line.
You heard it here first. Larry Charles says the privileged are a superior people. My name is Rick Glassman, and whatever we got. Mom, I'm recording the outro for my podcast. Can I call you back in a second? And how's the birthday party? All right, love you. Bye. Well, that was the episode. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And again, check out The Sixth Lead. I have it up, a link here. Maybe. I don't know how that stuff works because I'm not a whippersnapper. Mwah. Anyway. What? Fuck. All right. I gotta go. These girls that I had sex with, do you remember from the intro? When I was leaving, I'm so embarrassed they got on there, but you heard them calling me to fuck them and to make and stuff. I guess they want to go again. Come on, I'm not a young whippersnapper. It's hard for me to go that many times. Yeah, come on, I want you to stick it.
Scoot doo,
I want you to fuck.
blabbity blue.